Hey everyone, tonight we are going to talk about something that sits right at the intersection of high fashion, spiritual devotion, and what we today would call medically terrifying. We're looking at the Aztecs, and specifically, why some of their most high-status individuals would willingly let a craftsman drill holes into their healthy, living teeth to glue in precious gemstones. You're looking at a world with no concept of sterile equipment, no electric drills, and certainly no numbing injections. Just a piece of reed, some sand, and a whole lot of faith. It is a level of dedication to aesthetics that makes modern teeth whitening look like child's play. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the sheer grinding patience required, let alone the risk of infection. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always nice to see the numbers go up. As you settle in, drop your location, and what time it is where you are in the comments. It's fascinating to see where everyone is listening in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thin. That's the first thing you notice. You're 7,300 feet above the sea, and every breath you take feels a little shallow, a little crisp. You've been walking for days following the Great Causeway, a wide stone artery raised above the glittering expanse of Lake Texcoco. And now, finally, you see it, rising from the water like a mirage, an impossibility of stone and whitewashed plaster. Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Mexica people, the heart of the Aztec Empire. This isn't a city in a valley. It's a city on a lake, a feat of impossible engineering. The mainstream story you've always heard is true. It's an island connected to the mainland by 3 massive raised roads of packed earth and stone, wide enough for 10 people to walk abreast. You look to your right and see the famous twin-channeled aqueduct running parallel to the causeway, carrying fresh, clear water from the springs at Chapultepec on the mainland. One channel is flowing rapidly, while the other sits empty, clearly undergoing cleaning. It's a system so brilliantly simple and effective it makes you wonder what your own city council has been doing for the last decade. You're walking into one of the largest and most complex cities on Earth, a place that rivals, and in many ways surpasses, the great capitals of Europe at this very moment. You step off the causeway and onto the island proper, and the sheer density of life is staggering. The city isn't built on the land so much as with the water. The main streets are canals, navigated by thousands of silent, slender canoes. You have to stand aside as a long boat glides past, poled by a muscular man and piled impossibly high with bright green maize, iridescent ducks, and baskets of wriggling fish. The sounds are a constant hum, the dip of paddles, the chatter of Nahuatl, a language that sounds like soft consonants and running water, and the distant calls of exotic birds from the great aviaries. And then there's the smell. It's not the pristine, sterile scent of a modern, sanitized city. It's intensely alive. You smell the thousands of flowers grown on the chinampas, the legendary floating gardens that are actually man-made islands of woven reeds and mud anchored to the lake bed. They are the city's breadbasket, and their floral scent is intoxicating. You also smell the sweet, resinous smoke of copal incense, a sacred perfume drifting from the hundreds of temples and shrines. But underneath it all, well, let's just say sanitation for a city of this size was a constant creative challenge. There's a faint, marshy, human smell, a scent of life being lived very, very closely together. It's the smell of a metropolis, unfiltered. You push your way through the crowds, heading toward the city's heart. As you walk, you realize that you are an anomaly. You are an outsider here, and everything about you is wrong. Your clothes are drab, your hair is simple, your skin is unadorned. You are plain. In this world, the unmodified natural body is a blank page, a sign that you are no one, from nowhere. The people here are walking works of art. Their earlobes are stretched, holding massive, heavy plugs of green jade or polished black obsidian. Their noses are pierced with precious stones. Their skin carries intricate tattoos and ritual scars. They are living billboards of their lineage, their achievements, and their devotion. You see one man with a lip plug so large it looks like it would make eating soup a genuine adventure. You make a mental note not to order the pozole if you ever get invited to dinner. You follow the flow of the crowd, drawn by an invisible current toward the massive central square. The Templo Mayor, a place of staggering religious and political importance. You're not even looking at the Great Twin Pyramids just yet. You're too busy looking at the people. You're trying to understand the rules of this place, trying to see how this society functions. You're looking for the markers of power, the signs of real status. And it's here, in the shadow of those temples, that you're about to lock eyes with a smile that shouldn't exist. A smile that glitters in the sun with the impossible green of paradise. You're about to see the subject of our journey tonight, and you don't even realize that what you're looking at isn't just decoration, but a gateway to the gods. You're still just trying to catch your breath, adjusting to the altitude and the sheer, vibrant, terrifying newness of it all. You continue to drift through the tide of people, feeling increasingly self-conscious. Your plain, unadorned face feels naked, almost indecent. You are a blank slate in a world of living canvases, and it's a deeply unsettling feeling. Here, in Tenochtitlan, beauty is not about what you're born with, it's about what you become. It's a concept so foreign to your modern sensibilities that it takes a moment to click. You've been raised on a diet of natural beauty, the idea that the less you alter, the better. Here, the opposite is true. The natural, unmodified human body is considered raw, unfinished, and frankly a bit barbaric. It's a sign that you are not fully part of the social world, that you exist outside the complex web of rank, lineage, and divine duty. To be civilized in the Aztec world is to be modified. It means you have used discipline, pain, and artistry to shape your physical self into a proper member of the Altepetl, the city-state. You look around and start to see the evidence everywhere. It's not just the stretched earlobes and the polished labrettes, those massive plugs worn in the lower lip. You notice something subtler about the people of high status. Their heads, they're shaped differently. You see a noblewoman glide past, carried on a litter by 4 servants. Her attendants are fanning her with bright green quetzal feathers, and you get a clear view of her profile. Her forehead is high and recedes at a sharp, flattened angle. It's beautiful by their standards and completely intentional. This is a mainstream, well-documented fact. The Aztec elite practiced deliberate cranial modification. From the moment a highborn infant was born, its skull, still soft and pliable, would be gently but firmly bound between 2 wooden boards. Over months and years, this constant pressure would reshape the very bone, creating the fashionable elongated or sloped look that signified true nobility. It was a permanent, unchangeable sign that you were born to rule. You couldn't fake it. You couldn't buy it later in life. It was a biological marker of your destiny. You, with your rounded, unmodified head, looked like a peasant, or worse, a chichimeca, one of the nomadic barbarian tribes from the northern deserts, the very people the Aztecs defined themselves against. It's a complete reversal of aesthetics. What you would call natural, they would call wild. What you might see as mutilation, they saw as civilization. You find yourself wondering if your high school orthodontist with all those retainers and rubber bands was just a modern Tepantla, an artisan, trying to force your chaotic teeth into a civilized, ordered line. It's all a matter of perspective, but it's not also permanent. You see women with faces painted in vibrant, precise patterns. They use a brilliant, almost impossibly deep red paste on their lips and cheeks. This isn't just for a festival. It's part of the daily presentation. That stunning red, you realize, is cochineal. It's a dye made from crushing thousands of tiny insects that live on the nopal cactus. You've seen it listed as a natural food coloring on modern yogurt cups, but here, it's high-end cosmetics. A quirky but true tidbit. Some women would also mix this dye with an abrasive or waxy base to temporarily stain their teeth for specific ceremonies, believing it pleased the gods. You have to admit, it's a pretty bold look, and probably a nightmare to get off. It makes your own complicated 12-step skincare routine seem rather tame by comparison. Crushed bugs on your face? You'll stick to retinol, thanks. The modifications are a language and you're slowly learning to read it. Historians still argue whether some of the intricate tattoos you see, dark blue patterns pricked into the skin with bone needles, were purely a record of a warrior's successful captives, or if they also served as permanent wearable amulets to ward off ill fate. A man's status is written on his body. You see a warrior with a massive, eagle-shaped labret in his lip. That particular design isn't just a style choice, it means he's a member of the elite Eagle Warrior Society. You see a priest with earlobes so stretched they loop down to his shoulders, the skin dyed and polished. The very pain he endured to achieve that look is part of his offering, a sign of his devotion. This is a world where status is everything, and it must be visible. You couldn't just say you were important, you had to prove it, and your body was the ledger. The materials themselves were strictly controlled. A commoner might be allowed to pierce their ear with a simple plug of polished bone or obsidian. But jade, turquoise, gold, those were reserved for the pipeltin, the nobility. To wear jade when you weren't entitled to it wasn't just a fashion faux pas. It was a crime against the state, often punishable by death. It was as if wearing a fake designer handbag could get you executed. It's an intense system, and it ensures everyone knows their exact place in the cosmos. You're so busy decoding the walking status symbols around you, the elongated heads, the painted faces, the symbolic piercings, that you almost miss him. You're standing near the edge of the great marketplace, a dizzying whirl of commerce, and a man steps out of the shade of an awning. He's clearly important. He wears a tilmatli, a cloak of the most brilliant blue, woven in a complex geometric pattern. His hair is styled, and a large jade plug rests in his lower lip. He's negotiating with a merchant, and as he turns his head to haggle over the price of some exotic feathers, he smiles, and you stop. Cold. Your brain simply cannot process what you're seeing. It's not a smile of white teeth. It's not a smile of yellowed or missing teeth. It's a smile that glitters in the sun. It's a constellation of precious stones set directly into the surface of his front teeth, flashing green and gold as he speaks. Your brain stutters. You blink, convinced the high-altitude sun is playing tricks on you, making the light splinter into false colors. But it's not a trick. The man smiles again, a polite, closed-mouth smile this time as he receives his purchase, but you already saw it. In the center of his two front teeth, and on his lateral incisors are perfect, tiny, gleaming circles of deep green and brilliant blue. They are not caps. They are not a grill in the modern sense. They are inlaid. Someone at some point has drilled a precise, shallow cavity into the healthy enamel of this man's living teeth and has cemented a perfectly shaped piece of gemstone into the hole. It's exquisite. It's flawless. And the very thought of it makes your own teeth ache in sympathy. You can't help but stare, and the noble, feeling your gaze, glances over. He's not offended. In fact, he seems pleased by your dumbstruck expression. He gives you a small, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of a smile that is pure, calculated display. This is the entire point. It's the 15th century equivalent of casually pulling up in a Bugatti. This isn't just a status symbol. It's a testament to his wealth, his connection to the gods, and his almost superhuman ability to endure pain. This man's smile is probably worth more than your entire apartment, and it definitely hurt more than your last tax audit. This is the mainstream fact you came here to find. Dental inlay was a very real, very sophisticated practice among the Mesoamerican elite. You're looking at jade, the most precious substance in the Aztec world, more valuable by far than gold. That deep milky green wasn't just pretty. It was the color of life, the color of young maize, the color of the life-giving waters of Lake Texcoco, and the color of the sacred quetzal feather. It was the color of chalchihuitl, the ultimate symbol of preciousness. Beside the jade you see turquoise, that sharp sky blue, another stone of immense religious and symbolic value, traded down from far-off mines in the north. And you think you see a fleck of something else, a dark metallic glitter. It could be hematite, or even pyrite, fool's gold, which they didn't see as foolish at all, but as a mysterious fire-filled stone. You edge a little closer, pretending to inspect a nearby stall selling bright red pottery. You want to see the craftsmanship? It's astonishing. This isn't some rough, glued-on bauble. The inlay, you realize, is a quirky and vital tidbit about this process. The stones were shaped into tiny, perfect discs, triangles or squares, and then set perfectly flush with the surface of the tooth. The seam is almost invisible. It's a level of artistry that would be difficult to achieve with modern tools. How was it done with reed, stone, and sand? The precision is baffling. This noble can clearly run his tongue over his teeth without slicing it to ribbons. It's as smooth as it is brilliant. This practice, you realize, gives putting your money where your mouth is a whole new, frankly terrifying meaning. Historians still argue whether the color of the stone held more significance than its material rarity. Was the green of jade paramount because it represented fertility and the god Quetzalcoatl, or was the blue of turquoise more valued for its connection to the sky and the fire god Xiuhtecutli? For this noble, it's probably a bit of both. His smile is a walking theological treatise, a declaration of his piety and his power, all in one glittering package. You wonder if he has to floss extra carefully around the jade or if he gets food stuck on the edge of the hematite. These are the practical questions your modern brain insists on asking, but they feel silly in the face of such profound, permanent commitment. This is no temporary fad. This isn't a piercing you can let close up, or a tattoo you can cover with a long sleeve. This is a one-way ticket. He has permanently altered his own skeleton as a public declaration. You suddenly feel very plain, very boring, with your simple, unadorned, undecorated enamel. You get the sudden absurd urge to check your teeth for spinach and a reflective piece of obsidian, just to feel like you have something going on in there. As you watch, you notice the woman at his side. She too is clearly of high status, her earlobes bearing massive jade spools. She turns to speak to him and you see her own dental modification. It's different but no less dramatic. Her teeth aren't inlaid with gems, they are filed. Her front incisors have been expertly notched and shaped, filed down at the edges to create a distinct T shape. It's a sharp, almost feline look and just as intentional as her companion's jeweled grin. This, you understand, is another dialect in the language of the body. There isn't just one way to do your teeth. There's a whole aesthetic vocabulary. The noble and his companion finish their business. He gives a final, dazzling flash of his jeweled mouth to the merchant, a silent, glittering power move, and they turn to leave. His entourage of servants and attendants, all unmodified and plain-mouthed, falls in behind them. You are left standing in the marketplace, the smell of dust, maize, and copal incense in your nostrils, and your entire understanding of a nice smile has been completely shattered and rebuilt. You've just seen walking, breathing proof of a procedure your mind can barely comprehend. The why is becoming clearer. It's about status, piety, and civilization. But the how? The how is a dark, churning, terrifying question mark. How, in a world without electricity or steel, did they drill that perfect tiny hole? And how did that man not die of a screaming infection or agonizing nerve pain? You're hooked. You have to know more. You have to find the person who does this. You stand there for a long time watching the noble and his companion disappear into the throng. The glitter of that smile is seared into your mind. Your first, modern brain reaction is to label it vanity. It is the same impulse that makes you buy a designer watch or a specific brand of car. It's showing off, it's a flex. But the more you stand here, soaking in the atmosphere of Tenochtitlan, the more you realize that vanity is the wrong word. It's too small, too individualistic. What you just saw wasn't vanity. It was identity. It was a public declaration, as clear as a banner, of that man's entire place in the cosmos. In this society, separating your look from your rank is impossible. They are the very same thing. This is not a world of social mobility in the way you understand it. This is a deeply stratified society, divided primarily into two great classes, the Pipiltian, the nobility, and the Macahualtan, the commoners. And the mainstream historical fact is that these modifications, the glittering jade inlays, the intricately filed teeth, the elongated skulls, were the exclusive privilege of the Pipiltan. A commoner, a Macahuali, simply could not decide to get this done. It wasn't a matter of saving up enough cacao beans to afford the procedure. To even attempt it would be a profound act of social treason. This was all controlled by strict sumptuary laws, the rules that governed what you could wear, what you could eat, and how you could adorn your body, all based on your exact rank. Think about it. If a commoner was found wearing the cotton tilmatli, cloak of a noble, they could be severely punished. If they were caught building their simple adobe home with a second story, a privilege reserved for the elite, their house could be torn down. So you can only imagine the penalty for forging the most permanent status marker of all, faking your own skeleton. It was likely a swift and public execution. This dental work, therefore, was an unforgeable ID card. It was a sign, visible from across a plaza, that this person was of a different clay than you. They were born to rule, and their very teeth proved it. This makes the commitment so much more profound than any modern cosmetic choice. You can get veneers, but they are a covering, an imitation of a perfect natural tooth. This is the opposite. This is a deliberate rejection of the natural tooth in favor of something more divine, more symbolic. And it's permanent. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these laws was to maintain a clear visual distinction for social order, or if it was more about controlling the flow of divine materials. The Pipiltin believed they were related to the gods, so by inlaying jade, the symbol of life and divinity, into their bodies, they were simply reinforcing their sacred nature. They weren't pretending to be divine. They were proving they were. You start to wonder about the nuances. Was every noble expected to do this? Was it a choice? Or was it an absolute social requirement? You notice a younger man, clearly an attendant to a high-status merchant, who has a simple polished black obsidian plug in his lip. He's Makawali, but clearly a successful one. He's allowed that much. But his teeth are plain. You realize there's a ladder of modification, and he's on a lower rung. Then you get a truly quirky, fringe-level thought. What about the Tekutli? These were the appointed lords, men who were often born commoners but who had distinguished themselves so profoundly in warfare or statecraft that they were elevated to the nobility. They were new money, in a sense. Did they, upon receiving their new rank, immediately rush out to get their teeth drilled? It seems almost certain. It would be the final permanent seal on their new status, a way to make their achieved rank as visible and permanent as the inherited rank of the old blood Pipiltin. It was the ultimate social confirmation. This isn't fashion. Fashion is changeable. Fashion is fleeting. You can take off a watch. You can sell a car. You cannot, in 15th century Tenochtitlan, undrill your incisors. This modification is a lifelong contract, a pledge of allegiance to your bloodline and your social reality, bonded directly into your body. It is the most extreme, intimate, and permanent expression of the social order. It makes the entire concept of class feel visceral, physical. You don't just belong to the nobility, you are the nobility, right down to the core of your teeth. You look back at the merchant stall, your mind buzzing. You're past the why of status now, you're fully gripped by the how. You've seen the end result, and it's a masterpiece of tiny, precise craftsmanship. But the process is a terrifying black box. You have a vision of the noble sitting still, his mouth held open, while someone comes at him with a tool. What tool? Who was this artisan? Was he a doctor, a jeweler, a priest, or all three? You need to find this person. You can't just walk up to a member of the Pipiltin and ask, "Excuse me, who did your teeth? I'm dying to get an appointment." You're going to have to be more subtle. You turn to the merchant, the one who was just speaking to the jeweled man. You buy a small painted cup, your hands fumbling slightly with the unfamiliar cacao bean currency. And as he wraps it for you, you try to form a question, one that won't get you thrown into a canal. You ask very casually, where a person might find the artisans who work with the most precious and of stones. The merchant stops wrapping the cup. His hands, caked with the red clay dust of his wares, go still. He looks up at you, and his previously amiable market-day expression flattens into something unreadable, something bordering on suspicion. You asked where to find the artisans who work with precious stones, and by the look on his face, you might as well have asked him where to buy a god's skin. He doesn't answer you. Instead, he glances around as if to see who might be listening. He leans in slightly and his voice drops. He doesn't give you a name or a location. He just asks you a question in return. You ask of Chalchihuitl? He murmurs, using the Nahuatl word for jade. It's the way he says it, a tone of reverence, of awe, that tells you you've made a fundamental miscalculation. You were thinking commodity. He is thinking divinity. You nod, feeling stupidly out of your depth. The merchant looks at you, a plain, unadorned foreigner, and he seems to make a decision. He points, not to a stall, not to a street, but with a stiff, respectful gesture toward the great twin pyramids that dominate the skyline. The Templo Mayor. One does not simply find the carver, he says, his voice low. One must be worthy of the stone. The stone is a gift from Tlaloc. The glitter is a spark from Xiuhtecutli. It is not for looking. He turns back to your cup, his message clear. You have fundamentally misunderstood the transaction. You're not buying a luxury good. You are witnessing a form of spiritual currency. This isn't about conspicuous consumption. It's about conspicuous devotion. The glitter you saw in that noble's smile wasn't just a status symbol. It was a prayer, permanently bonded to his body. You pay for your cup and walk away from the stall, your mind reeling. You've just stumbled on the mainstream fact that underpins this whole practice. The materials were not just valuable, they were sacred. In the Aztec worldview, jade, that milky deep green chalchihuitl, was the physical manifestation of life's most precious concepts. It was the color and essence of fresh, young maize shoots. It was the color of the life-giving waters of the lake. It was the color of the sacred quetzal feather, the bird of Quetzalcoatl, the god of life, wind, and knowledge. When you offered jade, you were offering symbolic life itself. To inlay it into your tooth was to place a piece of divine, undying, fertile life directly into your own body. It was a way of making yourself a living offering, a walking, talking shrine. This is a few steps beyond just wearing a little cross necklace. This is wearing the cross inside your tooth. Suddenly, the pain of the procedure, which you've been dreading, clicks into place in a new way. The pain wasn't a drawback to be minimized. The pain was the point. It was the sacrifice. In Aztec cosmology, the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world and the sun, and humanity in turn owed them a debt. This debt was paid in Tlamasehualesli, the act of meriting or deserving through sacrifice. This could mean offering blood or incense, or in this case, your own profound, grinding, patient endurance. To sit there, unflinching, while a craftsman drilled into your living tooth was a profound act of bravery and piety. It was a personal, physical sacrifice to demonstrate your worthiness to carry a piece of a god in your very mouth. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation was this deep-seated piety, or if the piety was simply the socially acceptable theological justification for what was, at its core, a raw and dazzling display of elite power. It's a chicken and egg debate. Did the belief make them powerful, or did their power allow them to claim the belief? From where you stand, the two seem so tightly woven together they are impossible to separate. You start thinking about the mouth itself. You've been seeing it as just a place to eat and talk. But here it's something more. You're beginning to understand a quirky but profound anthropological tidbit. The mouth was seen as a sacred cave. It was a portal. It was the place where Tanali, the vital life force or breath-sul, exited the body. It was where Tlatoli, the all-powerful word or speech, was formed and sent out into the world. A noble's word was law. It could start a war, order a sacrifice, or doom a city. By decorating that portal, by lining that sacred cave with divine materials like jade and turquoise, the noble was sanctifying his own speech. Every word he spoke would pass over those holy stones, imbuing his commands with the authority of the gods themselves. It was a constant physical reminder to everyone who listened that he didn't just speak for himself. He spoke with the very essence of life and fire on his tongue. It's like having a little altar inside your face, which, to be fair, would make you think twice before you gossip. You don't want to anger the face gods. This level of commitment is staggering. You just post thoughts and prayers on social media. These people were willing to undergo agonizing non-anesthetized dental surgery to make their own bodies the prayer. It's a different, more visceral, and frankly terrifying level of belief. You walk through the marketplace, anonymous in the crowd, no longer searching for a jeweler's shop. You realize you're not looking for a craftsman, you're looking for a holy man, a ritual specialist. The merchant's cryptic deflection didn't give you a name, but it gave you the most important clue. This isn't a cosmetic procedure. It's a sacred rite. And that raises an entirely new and much more practical question. If this is a holy, painful, and high-stakes ritual reserved for the elite and pleasing to the gods, who gets to be the ideal candidate? Who exactly is lucky enough to be chosen? You've established what this is: a terrifying sacred honor. It's not a cosmetic choice, it's a right. So your next logical question is, who is the ideal candidate? You've seen that noble, and he was clearly an adult, a man in his prime, established and confident. You didn't see any children running around with glittering teeth, which makes sense. This level of intense, painful modification is probably reserved for those who have, well, proven they can handle it. You realize this isn't something you're born with, like the flattened skull. This is something you receive at a pivotal moment. So, who is lucky enough to get this done? The first requirement is, of course, your blood. You must be one of the Pipiltin. No Mekawali commoner is getting within a mile of this procedure, but it's even more exclusive than that. The mainstream archaeological evidence confirms this. Skeletal remains with dental inlays are almost exclusively adults, and they are always found in high-status burials, surrounded by the markers of power, jade beads, intricate pottery, and sacrificial offerings. This wasn't a teenage whim. This was a mark of achieved adulthood. You're looking at individuals who have completed their rigorous education and are ready to take their place in the state's machinery. Think of the Kalmakak. This was the elite school where the children of nobles were sent, and it was famously, brutally difficult. It was less of a private school and more of a combination of a monastery, a boot camp, and an Ivy League university. Young nobles were trained in theology, astronomy, history, statecraft, and, most importantly, the arts of war and personal sacrifice. They were taught to endure cold, hunger, and pain as a matter of religious principle. They regularly practiced auto-sacrifice, drawing their own blood from their tongues, ears, and limbs. They were being forged into the unbending, disciplined rulers of the empire. This dental procedure, you realize, was likely the final graduation ceremony from the Kalmakak. It was the capstone. It was the last, most intense test of that discipline they had spent their entire lives cultivating. It was a ritual transition, performed when a young noble was entering their full adult role, perhaps in their late teens or early 20s. It was the moment they ceased to be a student and became a warrior, a priest, or a high-ranking lord. By undergoing this ordeal, they were proving to the gods and to their peers that they had mastered the ultimate virtue, the endurance of pain for a sacred purpose. This explains the why of the timing. You can't put a child through this. They don't have the mental discipline or the spiritual understanding. You have to wait until the candidate is old enough to choose it, to understand the sacred pact they are making. Historians still argue whether this was a mandatory rite of passage for all high-ranking Kalmakak graduates, or if it was an elective procedure chosen only by the most pious, the most ambitious, or perhaps the most strategically minded young nobles seeking to get a leg up in the complex internal politics of the elite. Either way, it was a terrifying honor. You can almost imagine the mixture of dread and ecstatic pride a young noble must have felt, knowing their appointment with the artisan was coming. It was the final, glittering, agonizing step into their destiny. And here's a quirky related tidbit. It's possible the specific type of inlay was chosen for them, based on their new role. Perhaps a warrior destined for the jaguar or eagle societies received inlays of black, smoky obsidian or fiery pyrite, connecting them to the night and the sun. Perhaps a future priest, dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god, received the sacred calchihuitl, the green jade that symbolized water and fertility. The smile wasn't just a sign of being noble, it was a specific name tag, a declaration of your new job title in the divine bureaucracy. So the ideal candidate is a young, high-born adult, male or female, as we'll explore later, who has just completed their brutal education and is about to step into a position of power. They are at the peak of their physical health and their mental discipline. They are, in effect, the perfect finished product of the Aztec elite system. They are not lucky in the sense of winning a lottery. They are lucky in the way a marathoner who has trained for a year is lucky to finally be at the starting line. They have earned this. They have bled for it. And now, they are ready for the final, permanent, glittering transformation. Knowing this, you feel a new sense of purpose. You've figured out the who and the when. But it all comes back to the how. It all comes back to the artisan. This isn't just a craftsman. This is a ritual specialist, a high-stakes performer. You need to find this person. You won't find him in the market. You need to go to the source. You turn away from the marketplace's comforting chaos and look again toward the silent, imposing heart of the city, the great sacred precinct, where the twin pyramids of the Templo Mayor cast their long, dark shadows. The person you're looking for must be in there. You leave the chaotic, colorful, noisy world of the Tianquistli, the great marketplace, and move toward the massive wall that encloses the sacred precinct. The transition is immediate and jarring. The air itself changes. The smell of roasting maize and lake-damp earth is replaced by the overwhelming, piney, resinous scent of copal incense, burning from hundreds of braziers. It's the smell of the gods, and it's meant to purify, to elevate, and to intimidate. The ambient chatter of the crowd fades, replaced by the rhythmic sound of sweeping. Priests and novices constantly sweeping the vast, plastered courtyards clean, and the distant, unsettling boom of a hu-huttl, a massive drum from one of the pyramid temples. This is not a place for commerce. This is the spiritual engine room of the empire. You can't just wander in here. This is the most sacred square mile in the entire Aztec world, and it's heavily guarded by priests and temple attendants. You linger by the gate, a serpent wall carved with intimidating feathery snakeheads trying to look like you belong. You feel about as conspicuous as a flamingo in a flock of crows. But then you see him. It's a young man, probably no more than 18. He fits your profile exactly. He has the sloped forehead of the Pippleton, and he wears the simple, pure white cotton of a novice or graduate from the Kalmakak. He looks absolutely bone-white terrified, but he is walking with a rigid, practiced discipline. He is flanked by two older men, priests with their long, matted hair, who are guiding him or perhaps escorting him deeper into the precinct. This is your chance. You slip in behind another group of attendants carrying firewood, keeping your head down, and follow them at a safe distance. They don't walk toward the great twin pyramids, the temples of Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. Instead, they turn down a smaller, quieter alley between two temples, heading toward a cluster of lower, more functional buildings. These seem to be the workshops and living quarters for the specialized priest artisans who serve the temple complex. The priests stop the young noble in front of one of these buildings. It's an unassuming, single-story stone hut, impeccably clean, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the sun. A small, subtle carving of a hand holding a piece of jade is set above the doorway. This is it. The priests murmur something to the young man, half encouragement, half command, and he takes a deep, shuddering breath and disappears inside. You wait, hidden in the shadow of a nearby wall, your heart pounding. You feel like you've stumbled into the 15th century equivalent of a highly exclusive, terrifyingly primitive dental office. The waiting room probably doesn't have old magazines, just a few bowls for bloodletting. After a few minutes, the priests walk away, leaving you alone. This is your only opportunity. You creep forward, moving to a small slit-like window on the side of the hut, a space designed for ventilation, not for spying. You peer inside. The room is small and spotlessly, almost unnaturally clean. This, you realize, is a quirky but vital part of the process. This artisan isn't concerned with germs. That concept is centuries away. He is concerned with Tlazolli, the Nahuatl concept of ritual filth or sin. To perform a sacred procedure, the space must be absolutely pure, swept clean of all physical and spiritual dirt. The air is thick with copal smoke, which you now realize is a form of ancient ritual antiseptic. And there, in the center of the room, is the artisan. This is the man you've been looking for. He's older, with the lean, practiced hands of a master craftsman. He wears a simple white loincloth, and his own earlobes are stretched, holding polished obsidian plugs. He is the Tepantla, the one who works on teeth. This is the mainstream fact. This was a recognized, highly specialized, and deeply respected profession. Historians still argue whether these specialists were considered a branch of the priesthood, highly ranked jewelers, or a form of medical practitioner. Watching him, you realize he's all three. He's a surgeon, a jeweler, and a holy man, a combination that doesn't really exist in your world. He's got the kind of intense, focused look you hope your surgeon has right before they go in, but you're pretty sure this guy isn't carrying any malpractice insurance. The young noble is sitting on a low stool, rigid as a statue, staring at a spot on the far wall. He is clearly reciting prayers or mantras, his lips moving silently. He's holding on to his Kamakak training for dear life. The Tepantla isn't speaking to him. He's not offering any "this will only hurt a little" reassurances. He is busy at his workbench, a low stone table. He is performing his own ritual. He passes his hands through the copal smoke, murmuring to his tools. It's a bit chilling. You're all for blessing your equipment, but honestly, you'd also settle for him just boiling it for 20 minutes. On the table, you see a collection of small polished stones: the green calchihuitl, the blue turquoise, the black smoky obsidian. They are already perfectly shaped into tiny, identical discs. Next to them are bowls of fine, gritty powders in different colors. And next to them are the tools. You lean in, squinting into the smoky gloom, trying to see the centerpiece of this whole operation. You're looking for the drill. You squint, your eyes straining in the dim, smoky light, trying to make sense of the tools laid out on the low stone bench. You're scanning for something that looks like a drill, something sharp, metallic, and menacing. You're picturing a tiny, wicked-looking metal awl or perhaps a sharpened obsidian spike, but there's nothing like that. The Tepantla, the artisan, finishes his ritual murmurings over the workbench. He selects his primary tool, and your stomach drops. It's a tube, a simple, thin, hollow tube, perhaps 8 inches long. It looks like a piece of hardened reed or maybe the hollow, lightweight bone of a large bird. This is the drill. This is the mainstream historical and archaeological fact that breaks your brain. The drilling was not done with a solid bit. It was done with a hollow tube. The artisan holds it up to the light for a moment, inspecting the end. You can see it's been perfectly cut, the rim sharpened to a clean, precise circle. This isn't just any old straw he picked up by the lake. This is a carefully selected and prepared instrument. This is the quirky tidbit. The Tepantla would have used a specific, incredibly hard plant, something rich in silica, which would give it a natural strength and rigidity. He would have likely fire-hardened the tip, and then used a flake of razor-sharp obsidian, the black volcanic glass that's actually sharper than a steel scalpel, to trim the end into that perfect hollow cutting surface. Your eco-friendly, reusable bamboo straw just got a terrifying ancient cousin, and it's here to do a lot more than sip a smoothie. You watch mesmerized as the Tepantla prepares the rest of his drilling kit. He takes a small, supple piece of leather with a string attached, like a miniature bow. He wraps the string once around the body of the hollow reed. You realize instantly what you're looking at. This isn't just a hand-twirled tool. This is a bow drill. It's the same technology ancient cultures used to start fires or drill holes in wood. By sawing the bow back and forth, he can spin that hollow reed at a high, consistent velocity, far faster and with more torque than he ever could by just rolling it between his palms. Historians still argue whether the simpler, palm-rolling hand drill method was used for shallower inlays, or if the more mechanically advanced bow drill was the standard for all dental work. Given the precision you saw on that noble in the market, your money is on the bow. It's a brilliant, simple, and frankly terrifyingly effective piece of Neolithic technology. The young noble, sitting stock-still on his stool, watches this. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't move, but you can see the muscles in his jaw clench just once. He's been preparing for this moment his entire life. He's fasted, he's prayed, he's bled for his gods in the Kamakak. He's been taught that pain is an illusion and sacrifice is the only reality. But this is different. This is the final exam. This is not a test of his knowledge of the stars or his skill with a war club. This is a test of his absolute, unmoving, silent endurance. He's about to let a man use a fire-starting kit on his front tooth. This is the part where you would be frantically looking for the nitrous oxide mask, or at least a very, very stiff margarita. But all he has is the thick, sweet smoke of copal and his own iron will. The Tepantla holds the reed drill in one hand and the bow in the other. But he doesn't move toward the patient yet. He turns back to his workbench. He gestures and the young noble opens his mouth, tipping his head back into a shaft of light coming from a small hole in the ceiling, which is clearly designed for this exact purpose. The noble's teeth are perfect. They are healthy, strong, and white. There are no cavities, there is no decay. They are virgin teeth, and this man is about to intentionally, methodically drill a hole in one of them. You realize the profound, terrifying misstep in your own thinking. You've been picturing a modern drill bit, something that cuts and carves the enamel away. But a hollow reed, no matter how fast it spins, can't cut enamel. Enamel is the hardest substance in the human body. The reed would just polish the tooth and probably burn out. The secret, you realize, isn't the drill itself. The secret is in the small, gritty bowls on the bench. The Tepantla takes his hollow reed, dips the tip into a small pot of water to make it sticky, and then dips it into one of the bowls. It comes up coated in a fine, dark, glittering powder. This is the actual tool. The reed is just the delivery system. The cutting is about to be done by something else entirely. That gritty, glittering powder is the real bit of this drill. The hollow reed is just the motor, the tool that will spin the abrasive against the enamel. This is the mainstream, mind-bending fact of Mesoamerican dentistry. They used an abrasive slurry to slowly, painstakingly grind a hole in the tooth. This wasn't a high-speed, high-tech cut. It was an act of supreme, terrifying patience. The powder itself? It's not just random sand from the street. It's a carefully selected, extremely hard mineral. It's crushed quartz. Or it could be feldspar. Some archaeologists even posit it might have been finely pulverized obsidian. Essentially, it's a bowl full of microscopic, razor-sharp rocks. The Tepantla has just dipped his hollow reed in a slurry of water and what is effectively liquid sandpaper, and he's about to apply it to a living human tooth. You watch, your own jaw aching in sympathy. The Tepantla is a picture of absolute focus. He leans in, his left hand a steady brace on the young noble's jaw. With his right, he places the tip of the hollow reed, now coated in that gritty paste, against the dead center of the noble's right front incisor. The noble's eyes are squeezed shut, but his body is rock solid. He is a statue of pure will. Then, the artisan moves the bow. It's not a fast, zipping whir like a modern Dremel tool. It's a rhythmic, sawing motion. Shh, shh, shh. The bowstring wrapped around the reed spins it rapidly back and forth, and the grinding begins. It's a sound you feel in your own molars, a low, grating, gritty scrape. It is the sound of thousands of tiny quartz needles scratching at the hardest surface of the human body. The artisan's hand is impossibly steady. He has to maintain perfect, consistent pressure. Too hard and he could crack the tooth clean in half. Too light and he'll be here until the next solar eclipse. This is the slow reality of the procedure. It's not a 5-minute job. Historians still argue about the exact duration, but the consensus is that it was not quick. We could be talking an hour or even longer of continuous grinding per tooth. The artisan works in short, controlled bursts. Shh. Pause. He dips a small reed into a bowl of clean water and lets a single drop fall onto the tooth. This is the quirky and absolutely brilliant tidbit. He's using the water as a coolant. He knows innately that the friction is generating an incredible amount of heat. If he lets the tooth get too hot, he will kill the tenali inside it, the nerve, the pulp, and the tooth will die, turn black, and fall out. This would be a disaster, a sign of his failure and a ritual catastrophe. So he grinds and he cools, grinds and cools. He's also keeping the abrasive slurry wet, which is essential for it to flow and cut. He's a master of this delicate, terrifying thermal balance. He's performing a procedure that modern dentists only mastered with the invention of high-speed, water-cooled drills, and he's doing it with a stick, a string, and some crushed rock. You watch the noble. A single bead of sweat is rolling down his temple. His hands, hidden from the Tepantla, are gripping the edge of the stool so hard his knuckles are white. This is the moment all that Kalmakak training was for. This is where he proves he is not an animal, driven by base instinct, but a man of the gods, capable of mastering his own flesh. He cannot cry out, he cannot twitch, he cannot, under any circumstances, pull away. To do so would be to fail, to prove himself unworthy, to shame his lineage, and to ruin the sacred rite. The smell in the small room begins to change. Underneath the sweet, heavy blanket of copal smoke, a new, sharper, more acrid scent is rising. It's the smell of heat. It's the faint, alarming odor of tooth, of burning enamel. It's a smell you vaguely recognize from your own modern dental visits when the drill hits a sensitive spot. But this is more intense, more primal. It's the smell of hot stone. The Tepantla doesn't seem to notice. He is locked in his rhythm. Shh. Pause. Drip. Shh. Pause. Drip. He is a human machine, a master of this slow, grinding art. There is no suction tube to clear the noble's mouth. The young man has to just endure it. He has to swallow the gritty, wet slurry of his own pulverized enamel and quartz dust. It's a level of grit, both literal and metaphorical, that you can't even comprehend. You'd be choking, gagging, and probably punching a priest by now, but he just sits there, enduring, proving his worthiness one agonizing rotation at a time. The sound. You will never forget that sound. It is not the high-pitched electric whine of your world, a sound that promises quick, sterile, water-cooled efficiency. This is the opposite of efficiency. This is a low, patient, grinding sound. It is the sound of shish as the bow saws back and forth, the sound of scrape as the quartz-dusted reed spins against the enamel. It's the sound of human erosion. You are, in effect, watching a man carve a miniature canyon into a living tooth, and he's doing it with the geological patience of a glacier. Your modern dentist's drill might spin at 400,000 RPM, vaporizing decay in a fraction of a second. This bow drill, you estimate, is maybe spinning at a few hundred. It's the difference between a lightning strike and the slow, inexorable growth of a tree root. One is over in an instant, the other just keeps going. You try for a stomach-churning second to imagine the feeling. It wouldn't be a sharp, hot pain, not at first. It would be a vibration, a deep, resonant, gritty vibration, traveling from the surface of the tooth down into the root and then radiating through his entire jawbone. It's a feeling that would rattle his skull, shake his teeth in their sockets. It's the sound of two rocks being ground together, but it's happening inside your head. It's a level of sensory nightmare that you can't even begin to process. It's 1,000 times worse than fingernails on a chalkboard, because you are the chalkboard. The young noble is a masterpiece of self-control. His entire Kalmakak education was for this. He was taught to pierce his own tongue with maguey thorns, to fast for days, to stay awake on cold nights, all to build this exact muscle. The ability to disassociate, to mentally leave the room while his body endures the unendurable. He is proving he is not an animal, driven by base, flinching instinct. He is proving he is a lord, a Tecutli, a man of will. But the Tepantla, the artisan, is performing his own feat of mastery. He isn't just a brute force. He's a surgeon. This is the mainstream critical fact of the procedure. He has to know, by feel, by the sound, by the tiny puff of heated tooth dust, exactly where he is. He is navigating the tooth's internal anatomy by instinct. He knows he has to grind through the super-hard crystalline layer of enamel, and then through the softer, yellower layer of dentin beneath it. But he must at all costs stop before he hits the center. He must avoid the pulp chamber. This is the living heart of the tooth, the soft core that contains the tonali, the life force, which you would call the nerve and blood vessels. If he breaches that chamber, the procedure is a catastrophic failure. The pain would explode from a grinding, skull-rattling agony into a white-hot screaming, world-ending torment. The tooth would die. An abscess would be almost inevitable. And in a world without antibiotics, a simple dental abscess could easily become a raging, systemic infection that ends in death. This isn't just a cosmetic procedure. It's a game of microscopic chicken with a fatal infection. And the Tepantla hasn't even washed his hands. And yet, his skill is profound. You realize in a flash of insight a truly quirky tidbit about his tool. That hollow reed isn't just primitive, it's brilliant. A solid drill bit, like your dentist uses, pulverizes everything in its path and concentrates its heat at the very tip, right in the center. This hollow tube, however, only grinds along its thin, circular rim. It's cutting a perfect, tiny ring, leaving a little core of tooth stuff untouched in the middle. This means the heat is dispersed around the outside of the hole, not concentrated at the center, making it infinitely safer for the pulp. When he's deep enough, he won't have to keep grinding. He'll just take a sharp, obsidian pick, get under that little core, and pop it out, leaving a perfect, clean, cylindrical cavity. It's an astoundingly sophisticated and much safer method. The Tepantla stops. The shh cuts off, leaving a ringing silence, broken only by the young noble's ragged, shaky exhale. He's been holding his breath. The artisan leans back, inspecting his work. He's done. He takes a tiny, sharp obsidian point, leans in, and with a single, practiced flick, it's out. A perfect, shallow, 1.5 millimeter deep hole now sits in the young man's incisor. Historians and archaeologists still debate the average time this took, but all agree it was a profound test of endurance, likely lasting at least an hour per tooth. You've just watched an hour of grinding for a hole you could barely fit a grain of rice in. The young noble sags, his body slick with sweat. He spits a thick, gritty mixture of quartz dust, water, and blood into a clay bowl. He's done it. He's passed the test. Except he hasn't. You see, the Tepantla doesn't give him a moment. He doesn't offer a rinse or a reassuring pat on the shoulder. He simply wipes the reed, dips it in the abrasive slurry, and gestures with his chin. Open. Again. He's only done the first tooth. He still has to do the lateral incisor. The young man's face, which had relaxed in relief, tightens again into that mask of iron-willed terror. The grinding starts again. Shh. Awaiting, continue. It feels like an eternity. You've been hiding in the shadows, listening to that mind-numbing, bone-rattling shh of the bow drill for what must be hours. The sun has moved in the sky, and the shaft of light inside the hut is now at a different angle. The Tepantla finally stops. The grinding is over. The young noble looks like he's been through a war. He's pale, drenched in sweat, and there's a thin trickle of blood and dark, gritty saliva at the corner of his mouth. But he is still sitting upright. He has done it. He has endured the unendurable, proving his Kalmakak training was a success. He has two perfect, shallow, cylindrical holes in his front teeth waiting to be filled. Now the Tepantla's demeanor changes. The intense, focused, grinding machineman disappears, and he becomes a jeweler, an artist. He gently gestures for the young noble to rinse his mouth with water from a clean clay pot. The young man swishes and spits, clearing out the last of the pulverized tooth and quartz dust. The artisan turns to his workbench, and for the first time you get a clear look at the gemstone palette. They are laid out on a piece of clean, white cotton, and they are breathtaking. This isn't a random pile of pebbles. This is a curated collection of divine power. You see the chalchihuitl, the jade, in a dozen tiny pre-cut discs, ranging in color from a pale, milky sea green to a deep forest floor emerald. This is the mainstream fact. This was the most precious substance in the Aztec world, prized far, far above gold. Gold was pretty. It was the excrement of the gods, specifically the sun, but jade was life. It was the symbol of water, fertility, young maize, and the breath of life itself. To have jade was to hold the very essence of existence. Next to the jade, you see the brilliant, sharp blue of turquoise. It's the color of the sky on a clear day, a symbol of the sun, of fire, and of the powerful fire god, Xuticutli. Then there's a row of dark, mysterious stones. You see the polished, metallic black of hematite, heavy and cool, a stone you associate with the earth and the night sky. And beside it, the most surprising of all, pyrite. In your world, it's fool's gold, a cheap, shiny rock from museum gift shops. But here you realize this quirky tidbit is crucial. Pyrite was magic. It was a firestone. When struck, it created sparks. It was a piece of trapped lightning, a mirror of glittering, chaotic energy. It was seen as a stone of power and transformation, possibly linked to the all-powerful, unpredictable god Tezcatlipoca, whose name means smoking mirror. This isn't fool's gold, it's bling with a serious, slightly terrifying backstory. This is the noble's reward. After the agony, he gets to choose his destiny, right? Wrong. You watch, and the young man doesn't point. He doesn't browse. He doesn't say, "You know, I think the emerald green really brings out my eyes." This isn't a custom jewelry counter. The Tepantla isn't offering a catalog. Historians still debate whether the combination of stones in a single mouth followed a specific readable sentence of religious or political affiliation, or if it was a more general aesthetic choice from an approved palette. It is far more likely that the young man Esrol has already dictated the stone. He is becoming a warrior, so perhaps he is fated for pyrite. He is entering the priesthood of Tlaloc, so it must be Jade. The Tepantla himself seems to be in a moment of ritual contemplation. He passes his hand over the stones, not quite touching them, as if feeling their tonality, their spirit. He is choosing the specific disc that is correct for this young man at this specific moment. He's not just matching colors, he's matching destinies. It's like a high-stakes spiritual mood ring, except it's permanent, and it's for your tooth. Finally, he makes his choice. He picks up a single, perfect disc of deep green chalchihuitl with a pair of delicate bronze tweezers. It's tiny, no more than 2 millimeters across, and it has been polished so perfectly that its surface is like liquid. The young noble looks at it. This is the prize. This is the piece of divine life he has just earned through hours of grinding, vibrating agony. This is what will mark him forever, as one of the elite, one of the chosen. The Tepantla holds the gem up to the light, inspecting it one last time. It's perfect. He then turns back to his workbench. The drilling is over. The gem is chosen. But now, you realize, comes the final, critical, and equally mysterious part of the procedure. How does he make it stay? He can't just shove it into the hole. He needs glue. And in a world without super glue or modern dental composites, what, in the name of the rain god, is he going to use? The Tepantla has the tiny, perfect disc of jade balanced in his bronze tweezers. The young noble has his mouth open, the two fresh, raw, shallow holes in his teeth looking dark and vulnerable. Now comes the part that is, in many ways, more magical than the drilling. How do you make a smooth stone stick to a smooth tooth in a wet, bacteria-filled environment and make it stay for a lifetime? You're picturing some crude, weak paste, maybe a simple tree sap that will pop off the first time this kid tries to eat a tough piece of venison. You are, once again, completely underestimating the sophistication of Mesoamerican science. The artisan turns to his bench. He doesn't just have one bowl of glue. He has several small, meticulously arranged components. This isn't a pre-mixed tube of anything. He is a chemist, and he is about to mix his formula from scratch, right here, right now. This is the mainstream archaeological fact. The dental cement used by these specialists was not a simple, single-ingredient substance. It was a complex two-part or more composite, a sophisticated adhesive that modern science has only recently begun to fully analyze and appreciate. First, he takes a small, dark, hardened chunk of resin. This is his base. It's most likely copal, the same sacred tree resin he's been burning as incense. But this is a different preparation, refined and aged. He places a tiny piece of it on a hot stone at the edge of his brazier, and it softens into a thick, sticky, golden brown goo. This copal resin is an incredible adhesive all by itself, a natural waterproof lacquer. But it's not strong enough. It's too soft. It needs a filler, a strengthening agent. Next, he scrapes a fine white powder from a small block into the melting resin. This is the quirky and frankly brilliant tidbit. This powder is a mineral. It's most likely finely pulverized calcium phosphate, essentially ground-up bone or antler. He is mixing a tree resin with a bone mineral. He is, in effect, creating a 15th century version of a modern composite resin filling. He's making a biopolymer. He is mixing an organic glue with an inorganic strengthening powder to create a hybrid material that has the stickiness of the resin and the hardness of the mineral. It's an incredibly advanced concept, a perfect fusion of the materials available to him. He mixes the hot, sticky goo and the white powder together with a small, smooth stick, working it quickly before it cools. He creates a tiny, pea-sized ball of thick, grayish, putty-like cement. And he's still not done. He adds one last ingredient. He takes a single drop of a dark, oily liquid from a small vial and works it into the paste. What is it? Historians and archaeochemists still debate the exact full formula of this divine adhesive, but many analyses of ancient skulls show it had remarkable properties. This oil is likely a natural antibacterial and antifungal agent. Perhaps it's an extract from a specific plant, a jungle herb known for its purifying properties. He knows that the mouth is a dangerous, unclean place. He knows that if he seals tlazoli, ritual filth, which you'd call bacteria, into that hole under the gem, it will fester. It will rot the tooth from the inside out. So, he has incorporated a natural, time-release antibiotic directly into his filling material. Your mind is blown. This isn't primitive glue. This is a custom-mixed, waterproof, biocompatible, mineral-reinforced, antiseptic dental cement. It's probably better than the temporary filling your own dentist used on you last year, the one that fell out after 3 weeks. This artisan, with his brazier and his ground-up bone, is a master of material science. The Tepantla scrapes up a tiny speck of this freshly mixed, still warm cement on the tip of a pointed bone tool. He leans in toward the noble. This is the final, critical step. He has to work fast. He meticulously paints the inside of the shallow, drilled hole with the cement, ensuring every microscopic nook and cranny is filled. Then, with the bronze tweezers, he takes the tiny, perfect disc of calchihuitl, and with the steady hand of a god, he presses it into the cement-filled cavity. He holds it. He doesn't let go. He applies firm, constant, unwavering pressure. The young noble's whole body is tense. This must be a strange, new sensation. Not the grinding vibration, but a firm, dull, pushing ache. The artisan is setting the stone, squeezing out the microscopic excess cement from the edges. He holds it for a full minute. He is waiting for the resin to cool, to set, to create that permanent molecular bond between the sacred jade, the biopolymer cement, and the living dentin of the tooth. Finally, he pulls the tweezers away. The gem is in. It's in. It's perfectly flush, the seam invisible. The artisan takes a piece of soft cotton, dips it in water, and with a surgeon's precision, he wipes away the tiny, almost invisible bead of excess cement that has oozed out. He leans back. He nods. It is done. One tooth is complete. The young noble, his eyes still squeezed shut, has not moved. The Tepantla turns back to his workbench. He scrapes up another speck of cement. He has to do the second tooth. And you realize as you watch this incredible, advanced, and yet brutally primal procedure, that you've been so focused on the how, you haven't really confronted the most terrifying question of all. The Tepantla finishes. He packs the last bit of his divine adhesive into the second hole, presses the matching disc of green chalchihuitl into place, and holds it. He holds it for a long, silent minute as the resin cools and hardens, bonding the sacred stone to the young noble's living bone. The artisan leans back, a small, satisfied grunt. It is done. The young noble, who has been a statue of pure, vibrating tension for hours, lets out a breath that is almost a sob. He sags on the stool, his entire body shaking with the aftershock of the ordeal. He has done it. He is, in this moment, a living testament to the gods, a true member of the Pipiltine. He has paid the price. And now, as you watch him tremble, the question that has been hiding in the back of your mind, the one that has been making your own gums ache in sympathy, comes roaring to the front. The big one. The only one that really matters to your modern, comfort-seeking, ibuprofen-on-demand brain. What about the pain? You've been watching this entire time, and the answer is as stark and brutal as an obsidian blade. There is no anesthesia, not in any way you or I would recognize. There is no long, silvery needle gliding into the gum line to deliver the blessed numbness of Novocaine. There is no hissing mask of nitrous oxide to make him giggle and float away. There is no IV drip, no going under. This young man has been for the entire multi-hour procedure, completely, terrifyingly, wide awake, and feeling everything. Let's just sit with that for a second. He has felt the shh of the bow drill. He has felt the gritty, relentless vibration of the quartz abrasive, a feeling that must have rattled his entire skull, a grinding sound that he felt in his very bones. He has smelled his own tooth enamel heating up, that acrid, alarming scent of hot stone. He has tasted the slurry of his own pulverized dentin and quartz dust. He has felt the sharp, sudden pop as the tapantla flicked the core out of the drilled hole, a moment of sudden, sharp pressure. He has felt the artisan packing the raw, open, living wound in his tooth with that sticky, hot cement. And he has felt the dull, deep pressing ache as the jade disc was shoved into that cavity. You get a paper cut and you spend 10 minutes ransacking the bathroom cabinet for a cartoon-themed Band-Aid and some antiseptic cream with pain relief. You stub your toe and you invent new, creative profanities that would make a conquistador blush. This is a different universe of pain tolerance. This is a level of suck it up, buttercup that is literally God tier. The mainstream historical fact is that the concept of chemical anesthesia, of eliminating pain for the patient's comfort, simply did not exist in their worldview. Medical intervention was about balance, about ritual, about appealing to the gods who governed that specific part of the body. It was not about your personal comfort, but here is the truly mind-bending, quirky tidbit. Even if the tapantla had a magic potion that could knock the young man out, he probably wouldn't have used it. Why? Because the pain was the point. The agony was the tlamake walistli, the sacrifice, the offering. Remember? The gods had sacrificed their own blood to create the world, and humanity was in a constant state of debt. This debt was paid in blood, in fasting, and in pain. To numb the pain, to cheat the ordeal, would be like trying to pay your divine taxes with a bounced check. It would invalidate the entire ritual. It would be an insult to the gods. The young noble wasn't just enduring the pain, he was offering it. It was the most valuable, personal, and profound thing he had to give. He was in this moment in direct agonizing communion with the divine. It's like a cosmic spin class and the tapantla is the instructor screaming, "Give me more." Tlaloc wants to see you sweat. Feel the burn. That's your piety increasing. You'd have canceled your membership on day one. This, of course, leads to a massive scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Aztec worldview truly saw this pain as a transcendent religious experience, or if that's just the high-minded priestly justification for what was, at its core, a brutal social test. Was he really thinking about Quetzalcoatl's sacrifice, or was he just thinking, "Don't scream, don't scream, don't scream, my father will disown me if I scream"? It's the classic piety versus peer pressure debate, just with a bow drill. The answer most likely is a messy, terrifying human combination of both. But surely, they had something. A human can only take so much. You're not entirely wrong. But you have to shift your thinking from anesthetic, numbing, to management, coping. They weren't trying to stop the pain, but they might have been trying to help the noble navigate it. And the Aztec world was one of the most pharmacologically sophisticated on Earth. They were master herbalists. You're right. A human can only take so much. The young noble is still shaking, a fine, high-frequency tremor. The tapantla is not a monster. He is a master of his craft, and that craft includes post-procedural care. He is, after all, a priest-doctor, and he understands the limits of the human body, even one forged in the fires of the Kalmakak. He turns from his patient and mixes a small, dark, steaming infusion in a clay cup, which he hands to the young man. The noble takes it with unsteady hands, his new glittering teeth clicking slightly against the rim. He drinks it down in one gulp, wincing at the intense bitterness. This is not a celebratory cocktail. This is medicine. And the mainstream fact is that the Aztec pharmacopoeia was one of the most extensive and sophisticated in the world. Their knowledge of herbal remedies was staggering. We know this from texts like the Badianis manuscript, an illustrated herbal encyclopedia written by an Aztec physician just after the conquest. They had specific effective remedies for fevers, for skin infections, for digestive ailments, and yes, for pain. They had analgesics. But again, you must shift your thinking. This drink isn't meant to numb him, to give him the that's better relief you get from a couple of aspirin. It's meant to manage the state of his body and mind. That dark bitter brew is likely a mild infusion of Tolohuaxi-huitl, a species of datura, or sacred datura. This plant is a powerful anticholinergic. It's a sedative, a deliriant. In small, carefully controlled doses, it would not knock him out. Instead, it would make him feel woozy, dreamy, disconnected. It would take the sharp, screaming edge off the throbbing, radiating ache in his jaw. It would help him float away from the pain, to disassociate from his own physical self. He's not numb, he's just elsewhere. It's a chemical tool to aid his spiritual endurance. Here's another, simpler and quirky tidbit of pain management they might have used during the procedure: biting the reed. Some scholars suggest that the patient might have been given a piece of wood, reed, or bark to clench in the other side of his mouth. This serves two purposes. First, it's a simple physical brace, a place to channel all that muscle-tensing, agonizing energy. It's the ancestor of the bite-the-bullet metaphor. But second, that piece of bark might have been soaked in a similar analgesic or sedative infusion. While he's biting down, he's absorbing a small, steady, topical dose of the medicine directly into his gums, providing a tiny bit of local relief, just enough to keep him from flinching. Now, what about the hard stuff? The Aztec world had access to some of the most powerful psychotropics on the planet, namely peyote, containing mescaline, and teonanacatl, flesh of the gods, psilocybin mushrooms. Couldn't they just have given him a heroic dose of mushrooms and let him ride the cosmic serpent until the drilling was over? Probably not. Historians and archaeopharmacologists still argue whether these profoundly sacred, vision-inducing substances were ever used for routine, even high-status procedures like this. These were not party drugs or casual anesthetics. They were the most sacred gifts of the gods, the food that allowed priests and the highest sacrificial victims to speak directly to the divine. To use teonanacatl for a dental appointment, even a sacred one, might have been seen as a profound waste, a spiritual shortcut, or even an insult. You don't use the direct line to God just to get out of a toothache. The Tepantla watches the young noble as the Tolohuaxihuitl infusion takes effect. The violent shaking in his shoulders subsides to a mild tremble. The death grip he had on the stool relaxes. His eyes, which were squeezed shut in a mask of agony, flutter open, and they look distant, glassy. He is here, but he is also, very much, not. The artisan isn't finished. He mixes another cup. This one, the young noble doesn't drink. The Tepantla gestures for him to rinse. It's a post-operative antiseptic mouthwash. It has probably a strong infusion of a specific bark known for its astringent properties, its ability to tighten the gums, or perhaps it's just a brutally strong saltwater solution. This is to clean the tlazoli, the filth from the wounds, to close the raw, exposed gum tissue, and to ward off the infection that is now the single greatest threat to this young man's life. He has survived the artisan. Now he must survive the next 3 days. He has been given a sedative, a disassociative, and an antiseptic rinse. But he was given nothing for the grinding itself. The pain was the payment, and he paid in full. The herbs are just the aftercare, a way to ensure the offering wasn't in vain, to ensure he lives to show off that glittering, agonizing, beautiful proof of his devotion. The young noble is finally helped to his feet by the Tepantla. He's unsteady, his eyes still glassy from the Tolohuaxihuitl infusion, but he's not slumped in defeat. He's rigid with a kind of ecstatic, exhausted pride. He bows his head to the artisan, a gesture of profound respect. Not from a patient to a doctor, but from a novice to a master who has guided him through a sacred ordeal. He has survived. He has not flinched. He has not shamed his lineage. He is, in this moment, the absolute epitome of an Aztec lord. You, hiding in the shadows, are processing this through your own cultural lens. Your world is built on the avoidance of pain. You have an entire multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to eliminating it. From soft-gel ibuprofen capsules, to memory foam mattresses, to ergonomic office chairs. In your world, pain is a signal that something is wrong. It's a failure, an inconvenience, a problem to be solved, and quickly. Here in this hut, you've just seen the exact opposite. You've just understood in a visceral, bone-deep way the central mainstream fact of this entire ritual. Pain is not the problem. Pain is the point. In the Aztec worldview, enduring pain is the highest virtue. It is the ultimate measure of a person's character, their discipline, and their piousness. It's not just a sign of bravery in the way you'd think of a soldier on a battlefield. It's a sign of spiritual bravery. It's the ability to master your own chaotic, animalistic flesh, to prove that your tonali, your will, your soul, is stronger than your base flinching nerves. This is what the Kalmakak was all about. It wasn't just teaching them astronomy. It was teaching them to be hard, to be as unyielding as the jade they would one day wear. They were trained from childhood to be stone-faced, to show no weakness. This procedure, you realize, is the final exam. The Tepantla isn't just an artisan, he's the proctor. He's the sole witness to this young man's greatest test. Did he twitch? Did he gasp? Did he cry out? The Tepantla will know, and you can be sure he will report back. The young noble's reputation, his entire social standing as a new lord, depends on his performance on that stool. It's a terrifying, high-stakes performance of self-control. Here's a quirky, chilling tidbit that occurs to you. The sound. That relentless shh of the drill wasn't just a horrible side effect for the patient. It was a broadcast. That small, slit-like window you're peering through wasn't just for ventilation. It was to let the sound out. It's very possible that the young man's father, his tutors from the Kalmakak, or other priests were standing right outside this hut, listening. They were listening for the shh of the drill and for the silence from the noble. The constant rhythmic grinding, punctuated only by the noble's steady breathing, was the sound of his virtue being proven in real time. A single scream, a single sob, and he would have failed, publicly and humiliatingly. It's the most intense open book exam in history. This naturally leads to the central debate. Historians still argue whether this cultural perception of pain was a genuine spiritual belief, embraced by the individual, or a powerful tool of social coercion. Was this young man truly offering his pain to Tlaloc in a state of religious ecstasy? Or was he just a terrified teenager, trapped by a brutal social system that demanded this of him, knowing that if he failed, his life as a respected noble would be over before it began? The truth, you suspect, is an inseparable, agonizing tangle of both. He is terrified of the pain, and he is terrified of failing his gods and his family. The two fears braid together to create that perfect, unmoving, stoic statue on the stool. This entire act is a form of tlamasewalistli, of auto-sacrifice, just like bloodletting. But it's on another level. A priest might pierce his tongue with a stingray spine and draw blood, and the wound would heal. This is permanent. He has not just given his blood. He has permanently altered his own skeleton to prove his worthiness. He has accepted a piece of the divine into his own body. He is no longer just a man. He is a walking, talking shrine. As he turns to leave, he catches his own reflection in a bowl of still water. He bares his teeth. He sees the two dark green, glittering circles set like stars in his own smile. And you see his expression. It's not a wince of pain. It's a look of pure, hard-won, dangerous pride. He has faced the grinding wheel and has not been broken. He has been remade. He has proven his right to rule. He has joined the gods. And now, all he has to do is not die from an agonizing, flesh-eating infection. The young noble steps out of the dark, smoky hut into the blinding, high-altitude sunlight of the sacred precinct. He walks stiffly, a living icon, his new smile a secret of green fire he hasn't even had the strength to show yet. He is, for all intents and purposes, a minor god, remade in the image of his patrons. But you, with your 21st century knowledge, see something else. You see a walking open wound. You see a man who has just had holes drilled in his skeleton with unsterilized tools, in a non-sterile environment, and has just been sent on his way with a herbal sedative and an antiseptic rinse. The Tepantla has won his battle of skill and precision. But the young noble's real ordeal, the one that will be fought on a microscopic, invisible battlefield, has only just begun. You are, frankly, terrified for him. Your modern brain is screaming a litany of all the things that just went wrong from a medical standpoint. You saw the Tepantla's hands, skilled, yes, but not scrubbed, not gloved. You saw the hollow reed, which was maybe passed through some copal smoke, but it wasn't autoclaved. You saw the water used for cooling and rinsing, which likely came from the aqueduct, a shared public water source. The entire room, while ritually pure and swept clean of tilazali, filth, was an absolute theme park for Staphylococcus and Streptococcus. In your world, a dentist who operated like this wouldn't just lose their license. They'd be the subject of a horror movie. This is the mainstream, terrifying fact of his world. There are no antibiotics. There is no penicillin, no amoxicillin. If a bad air or evil spirit, what you would call a virulent bacterial infection, gets into that raw, exposed dentin, there is no way to fight it. The artisan's greatest skill, therefore, wasn't his steady hand with the bow drill. It was his intimate, instinctive knowledge of tooth anatomy. His entire procedure was a masterpiece of infection avoidance. The number one rule, the one he followed with divine precision, was do not breach the pulp. You saw him stop that perfect 1.5 millimeter deep hole. He knew by sound, by feel, by the tiny change in resistance that he was deep enough into the dentin to hold the inlay, but above the living pulp chamber. That pulp, the soft, nerve-filled, blood-rich tonali of the tooth, was the gateway to hell. If his drill had slipped, if he had gone even half a millimeter deeper and breached that chamber, it would be a catastrophe. He would have introduced that quartz dust and saliva slurry directly into the man's bloodstream. The pain, as we discussed, would have been blinding, but the infection, that would be the killer. You can picture the horrible progression. Within a day, the young noble's sacred ordeal would curdle into a very human, very septic nightmare. The tooth would begin to throb, not the grinding ache of the procedure, but a deep, pulsing, relentless agony as his immune system wages a hopeless war inside a sealed bone chamber. This is pulpitus. The nerve dies. The pulp rots. An abscess begins to form at the root of the tooth, a pressurized, microscopic bag of pus and bacteria. Within 3 days, his face, the face he had just consecrated, would swell up, his eye closing, his jawline disappearing into a hot, red, tender mass. A fever would spike. The sacred Tolohuaxihuitl tea would do nothing. This is cellulitis, the infection spreading through the soft tissues of his face. From there, it's a swift, agonizing, and irreversible journey. The infection would spread to his throat, making it impossible to swallow, or down into his chest. Or most terrifyingly, it would travel straight into his bloodstream, a condition you call sepsis. His body, in a desperate attempt to fight the invisible invader, would begin to shut down its own organs. He would become delirious, his body burning with fever, and within a week of his glorious graduation, this perfect specimen of the Aztec elite would be dead. Dead from a toothache. This is the razor's edge the Tepantla walks. This is what makes his skill so much more than cosmetic. He is quite literally drilling as close to death as a person can get, and then pulling back perfectly every single time. And that quirky, vital tidbit you observed, the divine adhesive, is his secret weapon. That antiseptic oil he mixed into the cement? That wasn't a spiritual flourish, that was his only antibiotic. He was sealing the wound with a time-release dose of medicine, a last, desperate barrier against the inevitable bacterial assault. Historians and paleopathologists still debate, vigorously, what the failure rate for this procedure was. When we find skulls in museums with these beautiful, perfect inlays, we are, by definition, looking at the success stories. We are seeing the skulls of the nobles who endured the grinding and survived the infection. We are not seeing the skulls of the ones who died a week later and were likely buried in disgrace, their failed offering a sign that the gods had rejected them. How many young nobles went into that hut and never truly came out? Was the Tepantla revered as a master artist, or was he feared as a man who held the power of life and death, with a success rate that was perhaps terrifyingly low? The young noble, still blissfully unaware of the microscopic war about to be waged in his mouth, is led away by the priests to a recovery room. He will be fed on a tali, a thin maize gruel, for days. He will be watched, prayed over. His survival is now the final part of the ritual. Enduring the pain was the test of his spirit. Surviving the healing, that is the test of his worthiness. If the tooth heals, if the swelling subsides, it is a sign that the gods and his own body have accepted the offering. He has truly, fully become a man. You watch the young noble disappear into the recovery building, a place of hushed tones and anxious prayers. His trial is over, but the verdict is not yet in. You linger in the shadow of the temple, the smell of copal and hot stone in the air. And as you wait, you start to listen. You hear the whispers of the temple novices, the tlamakaske, as they sweep the plaster floors and carry firewood. They aren't talking about the successful ritual. They are talking in hushed, nervous tones about the other ones, the ones who failed. It suddenly dawns on you that failure here doesn't just mean a crooked inlay. Failure is catastrophic. The whispers paint a grim, terrifying picture. You hear a story about a young noble from a very powerful family just a few months ago. The tapantla was working. The shh of the drill was rhythmic, and then a flinch. The young man, in a moment of agonizing involuntary weakness, jerked his head. Or maybe the artisan, for a fraction of a second, applied too much pressure. The sound changed. It wasn't the low, steady scrape. It was a sharp, sickening tick. Silence. The drill stopped. The tapantla had cracked the tooth, clean in half. This is a failure of skill, a human error, and the consequences are immediate. The artisan's ritual is ruined. The sacred offering is broken. The tooth cannot be inlaid. It is now a source of agonizing pain and, more importantly, a ritual contamination. It has to go. And your mind flashes to the horror of a 15th century tooth extraction. No anesthesia, no precise tools, just a set of bronze tweezers or a specialized bone liver. The tapantla would have had to brace the young noble's head, shove the tool into his already traumatized gums, and pull. The sound of the root tearing from the jawbone, the scream, which would be irrelevant now as he had already failed. The gush of blood. The young noble would leave the hut not as a glittering icon, but as a failed offering, mutilated, and with a gap in his smile that would forever be a public, gaping monument to his weakness. But that's not even the worst of it. The novices whisper about a different kind of failure. Not the fast, dramatic crack, but the slow, insidious rot. This is the mainstream paleopathological fact. The skeletal record is not just a story of successes. Archaeologists find the skulls that prove in horrifying detail what happened when things went wrong. They find skulls with massive, gaping, smooth-edged holes, lesions in the jawbone right above the roots of inlaid teeth. This is the unmistakable physical scar of a chronic, raging abscess. It's the hole the infection ate in the bone as it tried to drain. You are looking at the physical evidence of someone who lived, or at least survived for a time, in a state of constant, agonizing dental infection. The whispers you hear give this a narrative. They speak of a noblewoman from Tlacopan who underwent the procedure. She was perfect. She endured the pain. She walked out smiling, her teeth glittering with turquoise. She was celebrated. For a week. Then, the throbbing started. The evil air got in. Her face swelled as the whispers describe, like a fermented pulque bladder. A fever took her. The tzitl, the physicians, came. They chanted, they offered incense, they applied herbal poultices. But the god, or the bacteria in your terms, was deaf. The infection raged and she died raving a week later, dead from a cosmetic procedure. This is the quirky and utterly terrifying tidbit. A failure like this wasn't just a medical tragedy. It was a theological one. It was a sign. It was seen as a divine rejection. The gods had refused the offering. The young noble, by flinching, or the noblewoman, by succumbing to the infection, had been judged. They were deemed unworthy. Their tonali was weak. Their bloodline was perhaps not as pure as they claimed. It was a spiritual and social death that was almost worse than the physical one. It would bring profound shame upon their entire family. Historians still debate what the social and professional consequences were for the tapantla himself in the event of a high-profile failure. Was he seen as an unskilled butcher who had angered the gods with his clumsiness? Or in a strange twist of logic, was he seen as an even more powerful, divinely guided instrument, a man whose hand was so in tune with the gods that he was used by them to weed out the unworthy? The young noble died. The tapantla must have known his spirit was weak. The gods spoke through his drill. It's a terrifying thought. It's the ultimate blame the victim scenario. You look at the glittering, sun-drenched, sacred precinct with new eyes. It's not just a place of glorious, aesthetic devotion. It's a high-stakes casino. The glittering smile of that noble you saw in the market wasn't just a sign of his wealth. It was the sign of a man who had rolled the dice against death, agony, and divine rejection, and had won. He wasn't just rich, he was lucky, and he was a survivor. This makes that jeweled grin seem infinitely more potent and infinitely more terrifying. You wonder as you back away from the hut where this brutal, beautiful, deadly idea even came from. Surely the Aztecs in all their sophistication didn't invent this, did they? You feel the need to look further back to find the source. That question hangs in the air of the sacred precinct, unanswered by the whispering novices. Where did this brutal, beautiful, deadly idea even come from? The Aztecs are sophisticated, yes, but this practice feels older. It has the weight of ancient tradition. You feel your focus pull back, the sounds of the sweeping priests and the distant booming drum of Tenochtitlan beginning to fade. You are drifting, pulling up and away from the high-altitude lake city, moving not just in space but in time. You drift south, leaving the arid, sharp-haired valley of Mexico behind. You pass over the spine of the continent, and the landscape below you changes, transforming into a dense, wet green carpet. The air you're breathing now is no longer thin and crisp. It's thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of damp earth, blooming orchids, and animal rot. You are drifting backward in time. You fly past the year 1400, 1300, 1200. You are moving deep into the past, into the era the Aztecs themselves looked back on as their classical period, their Roman Empire. You are in the lands of the Maya in the year 750 AD. You are standing in the central plaza of a city like Tikal or Calakmul. The pyramids here are different. They aren't the broad, double-staircased structures of Tenochtitlan. These are impossibly steep limestone mountains, their tops scraping the jungle canopy, their stone faces carved with the intricate, winding hieroglyphs of a different, older language. The people are different too. Their heads are even more dramatically sloped. Their noses, often augmented with putty to create a perfect beak-like line, are stark and aristocratic. They are draped in jaguar pelts and jade-encrusted finery that makes the Aztec nobles look almost minimalist. And then you see a king. He is presiding over a ceremony, and as he turns to address his court, he smiles, and your jaw drops. You thought you knew what dental modification was. You were wrong. This is the mainstream historical fact. The classic period Maya were the original and undisputed masters of this art. The Aztecs, in their time, were essentially practicing a classical revival. The Maya, centuries earlier, had perfected it to a level that is almost unbelievable. You look closer. The king's teeth aren't just inlaid. They are a complete work of art. His front incisors have been filed into a sharp, intimidating T shape, a sacred symbol. And the inlays, they aren't the simple, elegant polka dots of the Aztec noble. The king has a tiny, intricate mosaic set into his tooth. It's a cross shape, made of 3 perfectly fitted microscopic pieces: a chip of green jade, a chip of black hematite, and a chip of blue turquoise, all set into one cavity. It's a level of micro-artistry that would make a modern jeweler weep. This is the quirky and absolutely mind-boggling tidbit of Mayan dentistry. They weren't content with circles. Their artisans, using the exact same tools, the bow drill, the hollow reed, the quartz abrasive, were drilling complex, angular, multi-part cavities and fitting them with custom-cut, interlocking gems. How do you drill a square hole with a spinning circular reed? It implies a level of control and a variety of specialized bits, perhaps sharpened bone or obsidian points for fine-tuning the shape, that the Aztecs hadn't even bothered with. They were the Olympic gymnasts of the craft, adding a 10.0 degree of difficulty just to show that they could. You see other nobles with different patterns. Teeth filed into sharp serrated points like a shark. Teeth with horizontal grooves cut into the enamel, inlaid with strips of pyrite. And the risks? The risks were all the same. The grinding, vibrating agony, the lack of anesthesia, the ever-present hovering specter of a fatal septic infection. The Maya just looked at that impossible, deadly high-stakes procedure and said, "You know what? This isn't hard enough. Let's make it fancy." This discovery immediately reframes what you saw in Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs weren't just trying to show off their wealth or their piety. They were, in a very real sense, cosplaying as their ancestors. They were adopting the most extreme, high status, and classical body modification of the civilization they most admired. It was like a 21st century politician deciding to wear a Roman toga to the office. It's a very clear, very intentional statement. It links them to an ancient golden age of power, legitimacy, and divine right. But this, of course, raises the central scholarly question. Historians still argue about the nature of this cultural transmission. Was it a direct, conscious copy? Did Aztec artisans travel to the old, ruined Mayan cities, study the art on the stelae, the carved stone monuments, and rediscover the technique? Or was it an unbroken, but rarefied, tradition? Did the practice just never fully die out, surviving in small elite pockets for the centuries between the fall of the Maya and the rise of the Aztecs, only to be readopted and popularized when the Pipiltin were looking for a new, extreme way to set themselves apart? It's a debate about inheritance. Was it a rediscovery or an heirloom? You realize that that young noble in the hut, with his new simple green dots, was participating in a ritual that was, at that point, at least 1,000 years old. This adds a new, profound layer to his sacrifice. He wasn't just enduring pain for his gods or his social rank. He was enduring it for history. He was physically, painfully, and permanently binding himself to the ancient, glorious, semi-mythical past. But this also makes you wonder. You've stacked up the motivations. 1. Social rank, a class marker. 2. Piety, a sacred offering. 3. Legitimacy, a historical link. It all seems so serious, so political, so theological. You can't help but wonder as you look at that Mayan king's absurdly complex, glittering, jaguar-sharp smile. Was that all it was? Or was there just maybe a sliver of something else? Was it in some tiny way also just fashion? You're standing in the past, in that humid Mayan plaza, staring at a king whose smile is a complex, glittering mosaic of pure, painful power. And you've stacked up the motivations. It's a marker of social rank, separating the Pipiltin from the Masahualtin. It's an act of religious piety, an offering of pain, and a way to embed divinity into the body. But as you look at that Mayan king's over-the-top, almost flamboyant dental work, you can't help but wonder, was it all that serious? Was there not, in that entire 1,000-year-long tradition, a single person who just thought it looked cool? Was there no element of vanity, of fashion, of just plain, old-fashioned human showing off? And in asking that question, you have just walked, face first, into the central, hottest, and most persistent argument among Mesoamerican scholars. This is the big one. The core debate that splits the field. Was this practice primarily about ritual, or was it primarily about rank? Was it a sacred offering, or was it a social flex? Was the goal to get closer to God, or to get visibly, permanently, and unforgettably above your fellow man? You have two main camps. In one corner, you have the social rank school. These historians look at the evidence with a more secular political eye. They argue that the entire point was to create and enforce a brutal, visible, unforgeable class distinction. The mainstream fact they point to is the one you already know: the strict sumptuary laws. This was not a choice available to all. It was a privilege reserved by law for the Pipiltin. If this were truly just about piousness, they argue, then shouldn't the most devout, God-fearing Masawali, commoner, be allowed to make this profound sacrifice? No. He'd be executed for the attempt. From this perspective, the piety is just the marketing. It's the theological justification, the high-minded excuse for what is, at its core, a raw display of power. It's like a king's crown. The jeweled tooth is just a crown you can't take off. It's the ultimate velvet rope, the VIP pass to society. bonded directly into your skeleton. It's a brilliant, insidious, and permanent form of social control. In the other corner, you have the ritual piety school. These historians and anthropologists argue that you cannot apply your modern, cynical 21st century separation of church and state to the Aztec world. To them, the two were utterly, completely, indivisibly, one and the same. They argue that the social rank was the ritual role. The quirky, but vital tidbit they use as evidence is that the Pippleton were required to sacrifice more. They were expected to bleed more, fast longer, and endure more pain than the commoners, because their blood was the premium fuel the gods demanded. From this viewpoint, the dental inlay wasn't a flex. It was the ultimate fulfillment of their sacred duty. The pain wasn't the unfortunate side effect. It was the entire purpose of the transaction. The gem was just the receipt. They point to the Tepantla being a priest artisan in the sacred precinct, not a cosmetic dentist in the marketplace. They point to the sacred, divine nature of the materials. You don't offer jade, life, and turquoise, fire, lightly. This wasn't showing off rank. This was performing it in the most painful, public, and permanent way possible. This, of course, is where the formal academic debate phrase comes in. Historians still argue whether the social stratification was the goal of the practice, or an inevitable byproduct of its sacred, and therefore ritually exclusive nature. It is the ultimate chicken and egg problem of Mesoamerican history. Did the Pipilton become elite because their ancestors were truly more pious and willing to endure these rituals? Or did they invent these painful rituals after they had already seized power, as a way to justify their control and keep everyone else out? You stand there, lost in the academic crossfire, and you realize the truth is probably, as it always is, a messy, human, and unsatisfying mix of both. You think back to that young noble, shaking on the stool. Was he thinking about Tlaloc? Yes. Was he thinking about how his father would be proud and his rivals would be envious? Absolutely. You cannot, in that moment, separate the pious terror from the social ambition. They are the same thing. His rank is his sacred duty. His sacred duty is his rank. But as you process this, your mind drifts back to the marketplace. You remember the noble with the glittering jade, and you remember his companion, the woman. Her teeth weren't inlaid. They were filed into a sharp, intimidating T shape. You've been picturing this ordeal, the Kamikak training, the warrior priest graduation, as a fundamentally male experience. Did they too have to face the grinding wheel? A warning, continue. You've been standing in the shadows of the Templo Mayor, your mind locked onto that image of the young male Pipilton, the Kalmakak graduate, the future warrior, stepping up to pay his dues to the grinding wheel. You've built this entire narrative in your head. It's a hyper-masculine test of a warrior's stoic endurance, a graduation ceremony for the men who would go on to rule the empire and feed the sun with the blood of their enemies. And then you remember her, the noble woman in the marketplace, the one who wasn't glittering with jade, but whose smile was a sharp, predatory, and equally intentional T shape. Was her modification just a lesser version, a lady's model, or was it something else entirely? You're forced once again to throw out your own cultural assumptions. The mainstream archaeological fact is undeniable. The skulls we have, the ones pulled from the high-status burials in and around the Templo Mayor, tell a very clear story. This was an equal opportunity ordeal. High-status female remains show both forms of modification. We have found the skulls of noble women with the same precise circular inlays of jade and turquoise as their male counterparts. And we have found many more with the intricate, sharp, filed patterns. It was not a men's-only club. The Tepantla's hut, it seems, had appointments for both the lords and the ladies. This shatters your warrior's graduation theory, or at least complicates it. A highborn Aztec woman did not go to the Kalmakak to learn the art of war. She was often educated in an equally strict but separate environment, one dedicated to the complex religious rituals of the temple, the mastery of the loom. A sacred art in itself, as weaving was seen as a form of cosmic creation and the management of a vast noble household. She was not being trained to take captives. She was being trained to be the rock-solid, pious center of the lineage. So, what did her modification mean? This is where you slam right into the central scholarly debate. Was a woman's dental modification a sign of her own piety and endurance, or was it a passive marker, a sign of her father's or husband's wealth and status? When you saw her glitter, did it mean I have endured the test and I am a devout, strong-willed servant of the gods? Or did it simply mean, my father is so powerful he can afford to have this dangerous, expensive, and beautiful ritual performed on his daughter? Was she an actor in her own right or a living, breathing billboard for her family's brand? You're inclined to think of her as a passive object, a trophy, but you'd be wrong. You're forgetting a crucial piece of the Aztec worldview. In this society, childbirth was considered a battle. A woman laboring was not just having a baby, she was taking a captive. This was her form of warfare. The quirky but profound tidbit is that a woman who died in childbirth was given the exact same honors as a warrior who fell in glorious combat. Her spirit, her tonali, did not fade away. It became a Cihuateteo, one of the divine, terrifying goddess women who lived in the western sky and would descend to earth to haunt crossroads. She was, in death, a revered and dangerous divine warrior. This changes everything. A high-status Aztec woman was also expected to be a paragon of endurance. She was also expected to face agony with a stone-faced, God-fearing will. Her battle was different, but the virtue of endurance was identical. So her trip to the Tepantla, it was her Kalmakak. It was the test of her own mettle. It was her way of proving to the gods and to the family she was about to marry into that she was not weak, that she was a warrior in her own right, capable of enduring the battle of childbirth and producing strong, noble heirs. She was proving she had the spiritual and physical grit to be a Cihuateteo if it came to that. This also might explain the different types of modification. You've seen more women with filed teeth. Why? Perhaps the filed patterns, the sharp T shapes, the serrated points, were associated with specific female deities. Maybe the T shape was a reference to Ik, the wind, or a symbol associated with a moon or earth goddess. Maybe the inlay was seen as linking to the sun, pyrite, firestone, and life water, jade, which were more male-coded spheres of influence. It's possible the choice wasn't inlay or filed, but a much more complex menu, matching the modification to the person's specific patron god or goddess, their lineage and their future role. So the symbolism wasn't the same as the man's, but it was equal in its intensity. His glittering smile said, I have endured the test, and I am ready to go out into the world and act as a warrior and a priest. Her filed smile said, I have endured the test, and I am ready to be the sacred, immovable center of the lineage, the priestess of the household, the one who will fight the battle of childbirth. Both were declarations of profound, tested, and terrifying endurance. This realization just makes the whole practice seem even more deeply embedded, more fundamental to their entire concept of civilization. It wasn't just for the men, it was for the Pipiltin, full stop. It was the price of entry into the elite, for everyone who mattered. And this, of course, just opens up a new, unsettling train of thought. You've been so hyper-focused on the teeth, on this one, singular, glittering, grinding ordeal. But if they were this willing, this eager to civilize their bodies with quartz abrasives and bone needles, what else were they doing? You've been so completely, utterly mesmerized by the mouth. You've been laser-focused on the glitter of the jade, the shh of the bow drill, the sharp filed T-shapes. That, combined with the sloping, artificially flattened foreheads of the Pipiltin you saw when you first arrived, has filled your mind. But now, as your eyes adjust to the sheer everything of Tenochtitlan, you realize you've been suffering from tunnel vision. The dental work isn't the whole story. It's not even a full chapter. It's just one glittering, terrifying sentence in an entire library written on the human body. You start to really look at the people around you, not just their smiles. You see a high-ranking warrior, a member of the Eagle Society, striding past. He's not just wearing a lip plug. He is wearing a tentittle, and it's a masterpiece of social intimidation. This isn't the simple stud you're thinking of. His lower lip, over the course of his life, has been progressively pierced and stretched, the hole gradually, painfully widened until it can accommodate a massive, flared plug the size of a large coin, carved from polished black obsidian into the shape of a screeching eagle's head. It's a permanent fixture weighing his lip down. You wonder, practically, how he eats, or drinks, or speaks clearly. The answer, you realize, is with difficulty. And that is the entire point. It's a mainstream fact that these two were strictly controlled by sumptuary laws. His tentacle is a sign that he is so important he doesn't need to be practical. He is a living, breathing declaration of status, and he has endured years of painful stretching to earn it. Then you look at the ears. You've seen the spools, but you haven't processed the implication. You see an old priest, his earlobes hanging in long, thin, leathery loops, weighted down by massive jade discs the size of a modern hockey puck. This isn't a simple piercing. This is a lifelong project. It starts in childhood, a small hole pierced with a maguey thorn, and then progressively, painfully stretched year after year, inserting larger and larger plugs of wood or bone. The risk of tearing the lobe, of infection, of it all going wrong, is immense. It's another Kalmakak in miniature, another test of slow, patient endurance. By the time he is an old man, his earlobe is just a living, fleshy frame for a piece of divinity. And then you see the skin. You see a warrior bargaining in the market, his tilmatli cloak having slipped off his shoulder. His chest and arms are not bare. They are a dense, dark blue, intricate map of patterns. Tattoos. But this is not the work of a sterile, modern electric tattoo gun that deposits ink in a smooth, relatively painless vibration. This is the quirky and painful tidbit. This is the result of pricking. The artisan would have used a razor-sharp bone needle or an obsidian flake, dipped it in a pigment made of soot and sacred herbs, and tapped that pigment into the skin, one agonizing dot at a time, creating the lines and shapes. The procedure would have taken days, been excruciating, and carried, as always, a massive risk of infection. And in some cases, it's not even tattoos. You see another man, a veteran warrior, whose skin is deliberately scarred. These aren't the clean, accidental scars of a battle. These are raised, puffy, keloid scars created intentionally. This is scarification. The skin would be deliberately, precisely cut, and then an irritant, like ash or clay, would be rubbed into the open wound. This prevents it from healing flat. It forces the body to create a thick, ropey, permanent scar, a raised emblem. His chest is a CV of his bravery, a 3D record of his devotion to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war. This is the great unresolved scholarly debate. Was this skin work, the tattoos and the scars, primarily commemorative or apotropaic? Was that warrior's chest tattoo a record, a biography of the captives he'd taken and the battles he'd won? Or was it magical armor? Was it a set of wearable prayers, a way to invoke the power of the jaguar or the eagle, a spirit vest to literally turn away an enemy's blade in the chaos of battle? To you, it looks like both. It's a record of what he has done and a source of power for what he will do. You stand back stunned. The head, the ears, the nose, the lips, the teeth, the skin. Not a single natural square inch of a high-status person is left unmodified. It is a complete, lifelong project of carving the raw, barbaric material of the human body into a civilized, sacred, and socially legible object. The dental inlay, which seemed so extreme, so shocking just an hour ago, now seems inevitable. It's just the final, glittering touch. It's the last, most difficult, and most sacred part of the canvas to be painted. And as you realize this, your mind flashes forward, back to your own time, to a sterile, white room. The world of Tenochtitlan, with its cacophony of sound. The shh of the drill, the rhythmic boom of the temple drum, the chatter of the marketplace, the whispers of the novices, begins to fade. The overwhelming, sensory-rich perfume of copal, lake water, and maize dust dissolves. The bright, high-altitude sun dims. The world goes silent, still, and cool. You are no longer in a vibrant, teeming city. You are in a quiet, sterile room, and the air is dry and climate-controlled. It's the smell of old paper, archival dust, and the faint, earthy, mineral scent of old, dry bone. You are in the collections archive of a great museum or perhaps a university's anthropology department, a place where the past is not lived but catalogued. You stand in front of a wall of tall gray metal cabinets. You pull a wide, shallow drawer, and it glides out on smooth, modern bearings. There, resting in a custom-cut hollow in the archival blue foam, is a human skull. It is the color of old parchment, a deep, brownish ivory. And the first thing you notice, the thing that makes it look almost alien, is the skull shape. You see the tabula erecta modification, the deliberate, artificial flattening of the forehead you saw on that noblewoman in the litter. This is, unmistakably, one of the Pipiltin. This is not a commoner. This is a person who, from the moment of their birth, was literally shaped for rule. You lean closer, your breath fogging the air, and you look at the mouth, and you stop. Your heart does a strange, tiny flip. It's real. Everything you saw. It wasn't a dream. There, in the upper incisors, are two perfect, tiny, circular holes. And in those holes, still perfectly set, still perfectly flush, are two discs of chalchihuitl. The jade is duller now after 500 years in the earth, but it is undeniably, unmistakably green. This is the mainstream foundational fact of this entire story. We know this happened because we have the bodies. This isn't a wild theory based on a vague description in a priest's letter. You are looking at the cold, hard, bony proof. This is the Tepantla's success story, the final lasting CV of his impossible skill. You're looking at it with your naked eye, but in your mind you see the X-rays. You see what the paleopathologists saw when they analyzed this very skull. They took a scan, and it confirmed the miracle. The artisan, with his reed and his quartz dust, did not breach the pulp. The X-ray shows the shallow, bowl-shaped cavity, and then beneath it a visible, intact, paper-thin layer of dentin protecting the hollow root canal. It is the physical proof of a hand so steady, a skill so profound, it borders on the supernatural. He drilled exactly deep enough and not a micron further. And the adhesive? Oh, the scientists love the adhesive. They've put tiny microscopic samples of it under scanning electron microscopes, run it through gas chromatography, and they confirmed everything you suspected. It is a complex, sophisticated biopolymer. They found the tree resin base, the copal. They found the mineral filler, the calcium phosphate, just as you saw. They've even found in some samples traces of other strange organic materials, perhaps the very antiseptic oils that Tepantla added as his secret weapon. It is, by all 21st century metrics, an astonishingly advanced, durable, and biocompatible dental cement. You slide that drawer shut, a feeling of awe settling over you. You open the next one. This skull is different. It too has the inlays, but the bone above the tooth, the part of the upper jaw called the maxilla, is not smooth. It's eaten. There is a large, gaping, smooth-edged lesion, a round hole that looks as if a thumb was pressed into the bone when it was soft. This is the quirky and horrifying tidbit of the skeletal record. This is the failure. This is the abscess. This is the skull of the noblewoman the novices were whispering about. This is the physical scar of the infection that raged in her face. The pus, with nowhere to go, ate a drainage tunnel through her own skeleton. You are looking at the physical evidence of someone who either died in agonizing sepsis or who lived for years with a chronic, weeping, foul-tasting infection, a constant, agonizing reminder of their failed offering. The skulls are the data, and historians and paleopathologists still argue passionately about what this data means. By counting the skulls, can we determine a failure rate? If we find 10 skulls and 3 of them have these abscesses, does that mean that Tepantla had a 30% failure rate? Or does that just mean that the people who died from the procedure were more likely to be buried in a way that preserved their skeletons, while the healthy survivors were cremated? How many inlaid teeth have we missed because the gems fell out after burial? The skulls are the only truth we have, but they are a silent, biased, and frustratingly incomplete truth. They are just the echoes. You stand there, in the quiet, sterile, 21st century room, looking at the 500-year-old face of a man who willingly endured hours of grinding, vibrating agony, all for a green, glittering idea. All the context is gone. His city is mud beneath a modern metropolis. His language is spoken by a fraction of its former people. His gods are silent, their temples torn down. Everything is gone, except this. The work, the Tepantla's hand, and the young noble's will are sitting right here in a metal drawer, a glittering, permanent fact that has outlasted the entire empire. And that thought, that simple final word, empire, triggers the last terrible realization. That empire and all of this, the rituals, the modifications, the beliefs, all of it came to a sudden, violent, and complete stop. You gently slide the drawer shut, the green glitter disappearing into the dark. Your mind snaps back to the 15th century, not to the Tepantla's hut, but to the Great Causeway. You are standing there smelling the lake water, and you see them. The sails, the steel, the horses, the beards, the crosses, the world is about to end. You are standing on the Great Causeway, the same one you walked in on. But the atmosphere is no longer one of bustling, confident commerce. The air is electric, taut with a deep, vibrating, communal dread. The Huhuetl drum on the Great Pyramid is not booming its rhythmic, reassuring heartbeat. It is pounding out a frantic, panicked alarm. You are back in 1519. And they are here. They are not a large group, a few hundred men at most. But they are an event. They are an impossibility. You watch them march up the causeway, and every single thing about them is wrong, a violation of the natural order of this world. You see the Tequitlahuaque, the masters on their massive, snorting, hoof-pounding deer, the horses which the Aztecs have never seen and at first believe are part of the men. You see the steel. Not the jewelry like bronze tweezers or the soft ceremonial gold, but hard, gray, joyless, terrifying iron and steel. It covers their bodies in plates and links, and they carry long, sharp-tipped pikes of it. They gleam in the sun, not with the green of life-giving jade, but with the cold, dead light of a winter sky. And the men themselves. Their faces are covered in thick, matted hair. This is profoundly shocking. In the Aztec world, facial hair is seen as unkempt, animalistic, uncivilized. Their skin is pale like limestone, and their eyes are the color of the sky, and they are all, to a man, unmodified. They are natural. They are raw. By the standards of Tenochtitlan, they are the most profound, terrifying, and heavily armed barbarians the empire has ever seen. The conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, are equally, if not more, horrified. They have marched into a city that defies their comprehension, a city on a lake larger and cleaner than many in Europe. But they are not seeing a marvel of engineering. They are seeing a demon's nest. They are zealous 16th century Spanish Catholics, fresh from the Reconquista. Their minds are a binary ironclad fortress. There is God, and there is Satan. There is no middle ground. And everything they see here, they are filtering through that one rigid, terrifying lens. This is the mainstream catastrophic fact. The Spanish looked at Aztec culture and saw nothing but the work of the devil. The temples to them were not places of piety, they were synagogues of Satan. The complex, beautiful, terrifying statues of the gods were not representations of a different cosmology. They were idols, demons carved in stone. And the people were their lost, damned, mutilated flock. A group of high-ranking Pipiltin, the very nobles whose modifications you have come to understand, goes out onto the causeway to greet, or more accurately, to assess, these invaders. You see the noble you first saw in the market, the one with the glittering chalchihuitl in his teeth. He steps forward, his jade ear-spools clacking, his bright feather cloak a blaze of color against the Spaniard's dull steel. He opens his mouth to speak the formal, flowery nahuatl of a lordly greeting, and the Spanish recoil. You see a young soldier, his beard just a thin scruff on his face, make the sign of the cross, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated horror. You see one of the black-robed friars, a man who has come to save these souls, lift his wooden crucifix like a weapon, hissing the word, Diablo. They are not looking at his rank. They are not seeing his piety. They are not seeing a 1,000-year-old tradition. They are seeing mutilation. They are seeing a man who has let a heathen priest drill holes in his teeth to insert devil stones. They see the woman with the filed T-shaped teeth, and they see a cannibal, a monster who has sharpened her teeth to better tear flesh. They see the massive, stretched earlobes and the heavy lip plugs. And they do not see signs of noble endurance. They see disfigurement. They see the mark of the beast. This is the quirky and profoundly hypocritical tidbit. These are Spanish men of the 16th century. They are not strangers to bodily suffering for faith. Back home in Seville, they would think nothing of a penitent who whips himself bloody in the street during Holy Week. That is piety. They would see a monk who wears a painful, itching horsehair shirt under his robes as a man of God. That is discipline. They would let a surgeon cut them open and bleed them with leeches to balance their humors. That is medicine. But this precise ancient sacred art of the Tepantla is to them uniquely and singularly barbaric. Why? Because it's not their barbarism. Historians still argue whether the Spanish chronicles, which describe these practices in lurid, disgusted detail, were accurate ethnographic observations or deliberate propaganda. Were the friars like Bernardino de Sahagún truly, dispassionately recording a demonic culture they found horrifying? Or were they, consciously or not, exaggerating the otherness of the Aztecs by painting them as inhuman, self-mutilating, devil-worshipping savages? They were, in effect, writing the justification for their own actions. You cannot unjustly conquer a civilized nation, but you can, and in their minds must, liberate a population of damned souls from the devil's grip. The jeweled tooth in this narrative becomes Exhibit A in the trial of Aztec civilization, the proof that they deserve to be conquered, enslaved, and saved. The noble, seeing the friar's reaction, stops. He is confused. His smile, his pride, his mark of nobility and divine favor, has just been interpreted as a mark of pure evil. The Tepantla's sacred hut? To the Spanish, it's a torture chamber. The quartz drill? A tool of the devil. The jade? A worthless green rock. In this single, terrible, uncomprehending moment of mutual disgust, on this causeway, the entire 1,000-year-old cosmology that supports this practice has just collided with an iron wall. It has been weighed, judged, and found demonic, and the iron wall is not going to move. That moment of mutual, uncomprehending disgust on the causeway is the beginning of the end. It is the sound of two worlds, two cosmologies, colliding with the force of a tectonic plate. And one of them, the one made of jade, feathers, and obsidian, is about to shatter. You are witnessing the end of an era. The conquest of Tenochtitlan, which culminates in 1521 after a brutal, agonizing siege, is not just a military defeat. It is a cosmological collapse. It is an apocalypse. The city, that impossible mirage of white towers and canals, is reduced to a smoking, disease-ridden ruin of rubble. The temples are torn down, their stones immediately carted away to build the churches of the new victorious god. The aqueduct is cut. The people are starving. And the gods are silent. Huitzilopochtli, the sun god who had been fed with so much blood and sacrifice, has failed to stop the limestone men. Tlaloc, the rain god, has not washed them away. In the wake of this catastrophe, a new power structure slams into place. It is not a negotiation, it is an occupation. The Spanish worldview, the one that saw the Tepantla's hut as a demon's nest, is now the law. And the primary driving force of this new law is the complete and total eradication of the old religion. This is the mainstream historical fact. The Spanish friars, the Franciscans, Dominicans, and Augustinians who arrived in the immediate wake of the soldiers began one of the most systematic, relentless, and successful campaigns of cultural erasure in human history. This wasn't a live and let live situation. This was a convert or die ultimatum. They burned the codices, the sacred painted books that held the millennia of history, theology, and ritual knowledge. They smashed the idols, pulverized the statues of the gods, and held mass, forced baptisms, washing away the old names and replacing them with Juan and Maria. And what do you think happened to our Tepantla, the master artisan, the priest surgeon of the sacred precinct? He wasn't just a dentist they could ignore. He was a mutilator, a demon worshiper, a high-ranking priest of the devil cult. He was a primary target. This is a quirky and tragic tidbit. The specialists of the Old World were hunted. The Tepantla had to make a choice, and fast. He could be re-educated, i.e., tortured by the Inquisition until he renounced his demonic craft. He could be executed, or he could vanish. He had to break his hollow reeds, bury his sacred quartz abrasives, and hide his precious palette of jade and turquoise. He probably had to trade his sacred bow drill for, well, basket weaving. A significant and less vibration-filled career change. The entire 1,000-year-old chain of master-to-apprentice knowledge. The skill of not breaching the pulp. The recipe for the divine adhesive. It was broken. It was severed, deliberately, in a single generation. With the artisans gone and the temples in rubble, the entire foundation for the practice crumbles. Every why you've uncovered is systematically nullified. Why do it for rank? The Pipiltin are gone. The Aztec nobility has been slaughtered, stripped of its power, or has desperately assimilated to survive. The new status symbols are a Spanish name, a title from the King of Spain, or the right to own a horse. Suddenly, that glittering jade smile that used to get you the best seat at the sacrifice is now getting you a one-way ticket to the Inquisition. It is no longer a flex. It is a liability. It is a public confession of paganism in a world where paganism is a death sentence. Why do it for piety? The gods are devils. To offer them pain is no longer a virtue. It is a mortal sin. The young noble is now being taught that his entire life of Kalmakak training was a satanic lie. He's being told that the pain he endured didn't please Tlaloc. It damned his soul to an eternal fiery hell. The very cosmology that made the pain meaningful has been inverted, turned into a source of terror and shame. Why do it for legitimacy? The link to the classical Maya past is meaningless. The Spanish don't care about the legitimacy of the heathen civilizations they just conquered. The only legitimate past is the one that begins with Genesis. The only legitimate power is the one that flows from the Pope in Rome and the King in Madrid. And so, the practice vanishes. It doesn't just fade away, it is extinguished. It is cancelled with extreme prejudice. This, of course, is a matter of scholarly debate. Historians still argue about how fast this vanishing act truly was. Was it an overnight stop in 1521, or did it go underground? Is it possible that for a few decades after the conquest, in remote villages far from the friar's gaze, a last Tepantla was still performing the ritual in a hidden hut for a few rebel nobles as a final, desperate, and incredibly dangerous act of cultural defiance? It's a romantic thought, but the evidence for it is thin. The new hybridized mestizo culture that was born from the ashes of Tenochtitlan had no place for this practice. The new generation was being taught to be ashamed of what their grandparents saw as the highest mark of civilization. The glittering, jeweled smile, a symbol of power for 1,000 years, was now quite simply barbaric. And in the space of a single lifetime, it was gone forever. And just like that, it's gone. A 1,000-year-old tradition, a line of knowledge, a sacred art, extinguished, shamed, and buried under the rubble of a new world, a world that had no anesthetic for the pain of conquest, but was very, very certain of its own civilized nature. The glittering smile of the Pipiltin vanished from the earth, becoming a secret known only to the silent skulls that would wait 500 years in the dark, damp earth to be found again, to tell their story to a different, sterile, and clinical world. You're back in that world now. You're in your own time. The sounds of Tenochtitlan, the shh of the drill, the whispers of the novices, the thundering boom of the huehuetl drum are gone. There is only, perhaps, the soft hum of the fan you turned on, that gentle, modern background noise. You stand up, and maybe you walk to your bathroom. You flip on the light. It's not the high, thin, piercing sun of the Valley of Mexico. It's a soft, electric, 40-watt glow. And you look in the mirror. You look at your own mouth, at your own teeth. They are most likely plain, unadorned, natural, or are they? You smile. Did you, perhaps, spend 3 to 5 years of your adolescence with your mouth full of metal? Did an orthodontist, your own modern Tepantla, glue brackets to your teeth and with the slow, grinding, aching patience of wires, Force your barbaric, chaotic teeth into a perfect, civilized, straight line? It was a test of endurance, wasn't it? Years of avoiding popcorn, of your mouth being cut up, of that dull, throbbing ache every time you got them tightened. And why? For rank, for status. So you could have the correct smile, the one that signals you come from a family that could afford the procedure. That's a mainstream fact of your own world. And now? You look at your plain white teeth and maybe you think they're not good enough. They're not white enough. You have been convinced by your own culture's sumptuary laws, the ones written on billboards, and beamed into your head through Instagram filters, that the only acceptable smile is one of brilliant, blinding, almost blue-white perfection. A color that does not exist in nature. So you buy the whitening strips, you get the laser procedure. You too are applying a chemical to your body to achieve a civilized look. You too are paying for a modification that signals your health, your wealth, your status. And then there are the veneers. People in your own time willingly letting a modern Tepantla take a high-speed, water-cooled drill and grind their healthy, living enamel down to tiny, sensitive pegs, all so they can have a perfect, permanent ceramic shell glued on top. It's the exact same procedure. We have just swapped the justification. We don't call it piety, we call it self-care. We don't call it a sacred offering, we call it an investment in yourself. But the result is the same, a permanent, expensive, and painful modification to signal your status. This is the echo. Sociologists still argue whether our modern obsession with cosmetic procedures is a sign of individual empowerment, as we love to tell ourselves, or just a new, more subtle, and perhaps more insidious form of social coercion. Are you really choosing that? Or is the comicac of social media just telling you to? The Tepantla isn't gone. He's just changed his clothes. He's the tattoo artist in Brooklyn, patiently driving a needle into a client's skin. And here's the quirky and most profound tidbit. When you ask people with extreme modern body modifications, forked tongues, tattooed sclera, subdermal implants, why they do it, they don't say, because it looks cool. They use the language of the noble. They talk about the ritual. They talk about the ordeal. They talk about enduring the pain as a way of transcending it, of proving to themselves that they are stronger than their own flesh, of making their outside finally match their inside. They are, in every meaningful way, making a sacred offering of their own pain to their own personal gods. We haven't changed. The human impulse to modify, to carve our raw bodies into civilized works of art, is as old as civilization itself. We are all of us, in some small way, looking in the mirror and wondering how we can become more than what we are. We've just traded the quartz drill for the laser, the obsidian blade for the scalpel, the jade for the porcelain. The technology is different, but the strange, deep human hunger is identical. That noble with his new, glittering, hard-won smile, he is you, you are him. And you both, in your own way, are just trying to find a way to make your mark, to prove you were here, to show the world that you are willing to endure. All for a smile that glitters. Wind down begins here. And so the light in your bathroom seems a little too bright now. You can turn it off. You can walk away from the mirror. The story is over, and all those people, the noble, the Tepantla, the friar, they are all gone. They are just echoes now, whispers from a world of smoke and jade, a world of impossible, beautiful, terrifying devotion. They are just a story to listen to in the dark as you get comfortable. The grinding has stopped. There is no more shh to listen for. There is no more pain to endure. There is no test to pass tonight. You don't have to prove your worthiness to anyone. You don't have to prove your rank or your piety or your strength. All of that can just fall away. You can let go of the tension in your jaw. You can let your own simple, unmodified teeth rest comfortably. You can just feel the weight of your body supported and safe. There is nothing required of you right now except to breathe, to let the air come in, and to let it go, to let the images of the past, the whitewashed temples, the green glitter of the Calchihuitl, the dark sacred smoke of the copal, all of it just fade into a soft, indistinct, comfortable haze. That whole world, with all its sound and fury, has settled into the quiet, still, deep dust of history. And you can settle too. You can let your own mind become quiet, and still, and deep. There is only the gentle sound of the fan, or perhaps the silence of your own room and the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing. You have listened, and now you can just rest. You can just be. And you can sleep.